Good evening and welcome to the Chatham Board of Selectmen's October 20th, 2020 meeting. This is remote participation only. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording this meeting, please notify me. Pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions, I'm going to ask before I continue that everybody please mute their devices. Thank you. Pursuant to Governor Baker's 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 23, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chatham Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 134-208-476#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. So at this time, I ask the remote participants to please mute your audio and disable your video until a time that you are either called upon to speak or you're making a presentation. That way I'm able to see the Board of Selectmen and we can conduct our business. So please, if you're not speaking right now, please disable your video and audio. All right, presently I'm gonna do a roll call of the Board of Selectmen. Selectman Kokolas?
Present.
Selectman Metters?
Present.
Selectman Dykens?
Present.
Selectman DeCastro?
Present.
And of course, I'm present. So we have a quorum and we're going to begin. Tonight, we have a few items that we're going to go forward with. First off, we'll do acceptance and approval of the meeting minutes for October 13th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
To approve.
Okay, I heard Jeff. Do I have a second?
Second, Peter.
Okay. Are there any edits or additions? I see that Dean had his hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the on page 9, about thirds of the way down, under item 5, it says Selectman said he would be willing to attend future meetings on behalf of the board.
Dean, I have to have you increase your volume. I can't hear you very well.
Okay. All right.
Or move a little closer.
Page 9. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Page 9, 2/3 of the way down under item 5, third sentence up from the bottom of item 5. Selectman DeCastro said he would be willing to attend future meetings on behalf of the board, but was not able to attend. I want to change that to read, but would not be attending.
Okay.
But would not be attending the first meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? None? Okay, we'll take a vote to approve the meeting minutes of October 13th. Peter?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Okay. Again, I'm going to ask that if you are not speaking at the moment or you have been called on, please disable your video. And when the time comes, we'll be, when your presentation is being made, you can enable it. And if you're going to speak, you obviously can as well.
Madam
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
isn't Selectman Kokolas an extension on that one? Because he was not.
Oh,
Right.
let's go back. Yes, Peter, would you like to change your vote? You were not present for that meeting.
I understand. Well, I watched the whole thing.
Okay.
And I not vote if as long as I, watched it, and I did watch it on TV and I went back.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. Okay, the next item, I'm just going to review the meeting at this point to clarify how we're doing things. The next item will be public announcements and agenda item requests. Public announcements not relevant to any of the new business, and agenda items requests, obviously, if a public or the board wishes to make a request at this time. I do have an agenda, announcement. I just want to say that, remind everybody that registering to vote deadlines are in person and online October 24th. If you're mailing back your registration to vote, it needs to be postmarked by October 24th. Absentee or voting by mail requests can be received up to 5 p.m. on October 28th and returned by mail with a postmark by November 3rd, or returned in person to the polls or at our voters drop box at Town Hall. And again, early voting is taking place in Chatham, and our dates and times are posted on the town clerk's website. And early voting is taking place at the community center. So I voted early. It was great. It was easy. Social distancing, everything was wonderful. Okay, any agenda item or public announcements from the Board of Selectmen? I see that Dean has his hand up, and then Corey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 agenda item requests.
Okay,
First, I'd like to request an agenda item that the board consider discontinuance of the downtown working group that we had in place this summer, as its work has essentially been completed. And I would ask that we take that up within 30 days if possible.
okay. Anything else, Dean?
Yes, I'd like to request an agenda item that the board consider filing special legislation with the general court to allow the town of Chatham to expend Community Preservation Act monies for attainable housing, including contributions to a municipal attainable housing trust fund. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Corey, and then Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Obviously, with the virtual meetings, I haven't been done my normal recruiting of volunteers to serve on the boards, committees, and commissions. But I do want to draw attention to one opening that just became available as of last week. Due to a sitting resignation on our airport commission, there is an opening for unexpired term. I do know the airport commission will be meeting very shortly. So there is a seat open. So if anyone is interested, please go on the town website and fill out the talent form, contact the town directly, Shauna. But I just want to draw attention to that one opening that just recently became available. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to revisit paid parking. I know that we placed it on the agenda a month or so ago, but I think it's an item that has kind of a long lead time. So if we really are serious about revisiting it, and I'm serious about revisiting it, I'd like to get it on the agenda. So I just tweaking everybody on that one. And there's another issue that I'd like to raise and place on a future agenda. And it's an older one, and people are going to sigh deeply, but it's a shuttle bus. I went by the Fish Pier the other weekend, 2 weekends ago, and it was a madhouse. And I don't understand why we can't have off-site parking somewhere and get tourists down to that Fish Pier and around town via a shuttle bus. I could barely get by my car. The people were scattered. People parking on Barcliff up and down Shore Road. It was a mess. So okay. I want to revisit a shuttle bus. So please place that on a future agenda. And I have an item for Jill during her COVID announcement. So I'll keep that one for then. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, any other folks that want to make an agenda item request or a public announcement? Susanna Nickerson, you're next, and then Frank Messina. Susanna?
Hi, I'm Susanna Nickerson, Main Street, Chatham. I would like to express my deep disappointment that the town of Chatham is going forward with the sidewalk reconstruction project at this particular time in history. The pandemic has disrupted businesses and our tourist trade. The sidewalk project will impact Main Street traffic from now until December 21st. That's the week of Christmas. There has been no public discussion or mediation discussion. how businesses might move through this project, and loss of income. We were notified on Columbus Day weekend that the project would take place. The item was not on the agenda for Tuesday, October 13th, Board of Selectmen's meeting, and it is not on the agenda for this week's meeting tonight. No formal public discussion with shop owners and restaurant owners will take place. Let our small business owners catch up, please. Postpone this project for a year or two. Thank you very much. Thank you, Shireen.
Thank you, Susanna. Frank?
Yes, hi. This is Frank Messina, South Chatham. I guess I'm speaking for myself and chair of the Historical Commission. The public announcement is, most people may know by now, but the historic Coast Guard boathouse, which spent close to 50 years in Chatham and actually harbored one of our most historic artifacts, which unfortunately is no longer in Chatham and in New Orleans, the Pendleton Coast Guard boat. Well, long story short, is the Coast Guard boathouse, which about 15 years ago, a group of us tried to save it, but were unfortunately unable to find a place in Chatham to keep the Coast Guard boathouse when the owners of the property and the boathouse on State Harbor decided they wanted to build another house. So long story short, the Coast Guard boathouse is currently up for auction. It is currently sitting on a pier in Hull. We have tried over the last 10 years to find places to put it. Quincy at one point thought they could use it for a boathouse for this sailing program, but that didn't work out. So I would like to just to bring it to the public's attention that the boathouse, our historic Coast Guard boathouse, is looking for a home again. And I would like to bring it home to Chatham, and I would like to ask the Board of Selectmen for a future agenda item to actually discuss this. There are a number of locations where a group of us who are trying to bring it back to Chatham feel it could be. And so we hope that the Board of Selectmen will consider that for a future agenda item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. I'd ask that whoever's speaking in the background to please, we're asking everybody to please disable their computers, audio, and their phones. I don't know who's speaking right now, but we're going to ask that you mute. Please mute your phones. Thank you. All right. Any other agenda item announcements, public announcements, and agenda item requests from the public? You can call out if you're on the phone. Okay. Hearing none, we're going to review what we're going to speak to tonight and go through the new business. So our next order is new business. We'll get a coronavirus update from the Director of Natural Resources and the Town Manager. And then we'll have a public comment portion of our new business where anybody can speak to the business agenda items. And the following are annual investment report, our community Halloween update, event update, consider requests for outdoor sale of goods, project communication protocols and plans, committee appointments, and confirming whether we're going to hold a November 3rd meeting during on election day. And then we'll have another public comment period where people, we're going to discuss the items. We'll have our discussion and any actions, and then we'll move over to public comments. So right now we're going to do a coronavirus update with Dr. Duncanson and our town manager. And I think Dr. Duncanson's going first.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. So our quick COVID-19 update for this week. Right now, worldwide, we are over 40.6 million cases. And we have over 1,121,000 deaths on a worldwide basis. In the US, we currently have over 8.2 million cases and we are over 220,000 deaths in the United States. As we've talked about last week and in the last couple of weeks, India is rapidly catching up to the US in terms of number of cases. They are currently standing at approximately 7.6 million. And Brazil continues to be number 2 in the number of deaths at 154,000. So unfortunately, the US continues to lead in both the number of cases and the number of deaths, although India is rapidly catching up to us in terms of the number of overall cases. In Massachusetts, as of this afternoon, we had 145,464 cases, which is up approximately 5,000 cases since this time last week. We currently have 9,758 deaths in the Commonwealth, which is up 128 since last week. In Barnstable County, we are currently at 1,902 cases, confirmed cases, and that's an increase of 24 cases confirmed since last week. And we are currently at 181 deaths in Barnstable County, which is an increase of 3 over last week. So the cases continue to go up in all areas. In Chatham, we are currently at 35 cases and 2 deaths, and those are cumulative numbers since last January. We have had a couple of reports in the last 2 days of additional probable cases in Chatham, and those are cases where someone has been tested with the rapid antigen test, but it has not yet been confirmed with the gold standard PCR test. So officially, we are still at 35 cases. We are aware of those probable cases, where they're located, and the police and fire departments are aware of those locations as well. So if they do have to respond there, they have that knowledge ahead of time. A couple other things I just wanted to hit on fairly quickly. As I'm sure everybody's aware, there has been a pretty consistent increase in the number of cases around the country and in Massachusetts specifically over the last several weeks. In the last 7 days since last week, we have averaged about 675 cases a day. But for the last 2 days, we've had over 800 cases increase each day. So we're starting to see what I think we've all feared, and that is a second wave, hitting as the colder weather starts to set in and people spend more time indoors. One of the things I did want to touch on, because even though we've seen that increase in cases, we are not seeing a commensurate increase in hospitalizations or in deaths. And the reason for that is, and this is coming from the State Department of Public Health, who are looking at this data, the caseload that we're seeing, the cases that we're seeing now are in the younger demographic. If you remember last spring, it was primarily the older population, the elderly, that were being hit very hard, resulting in a large number of deaths as well as a large number of hospitalizations. Currently, the majority of cases is happening in a younger demographic where the disease tends to be less severe, resulting in less hospitalizations and less deaths. So, in some respects, it's a good thing, but the fact that we still have this increase in cases, is not good overall. So I just wanted to touch on that, and just a statistic that I didn't have last week when I alluded to it. Roughly between 30 and 35% of the cases and clusters occurring in Massachusetts right now are related to household contacts. So that just reinforces what we said last week about, watching family gatherings and whatnot. Even if you have family gatherings, continue that social distance, continue the mask wearing, continue the hand washing, because roughly a third of our cases are attributable to those kind of events. Birthday parties, barbecues in the backyard kind of thing with other members of your family who may not be members of your immediate household. So we want to continue to hammer that home to folks. A quick update, as I think we reported last week, we were concerned about a potential situation involving DPW. We did undertake testing last week of 16 DPW employees, as well as 8 employees that worked in the town offices who came in contact with DPW staff during the move of the accounting office. And I'm happy to say that the test results came back on Saturday and all were negative. So that was great news. So hopefully we continue that trend with Chatham employees and we can keep everybody safe by taking all the appropriate precautions. But I did want to talk about just briefly one incident that occurred yesterday and today. We've had a town employee put at potential risk of COVID-19 because a member of the public was not following the proper protocols. Very similar to an incident earlier this fall, not in Chatham, but in the Commonwealth, where parents sent a school child to school knowing that the child had tested positive. We had 2 town employees who interacted with a member of the public who had tested positive and frankly should have been home self-isolating. They didn't do that. They didn't follow the protocol, so they potentially put 2 town employees at risk. We're in the process of arranging to get them tested right now. But it just, we need to hammer home again and again and again. If you're positive, if you test positive for COVID-19, you need to stay home and isolate. That doesn't mean you go out with your friends. It doesn't mean you go out and continue to run your business. You need to stay home for that 10-day quarantine period or self-isolation period. That's the only way we're not going to put other people at risk. And that's critical here. I mean, we can all do everything as individuals to protect ourselves, but it's incumbent upon people who know they are COVID-19 positive to stay home and not put others potentially at risk. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bob. Does the board have any questions for Dr. Duncanson? I see Dean, your hand's up already. Dean.
Thank you, Bob, for your, with respect to the last item that you mentioned, that incident, what, and to the extent that you can say, did that take place at a town office or outside? And the second question is, do we have posted? I know there's a lot of information posted on outside of town, the town offices on Main Street, and I assume at the annex as well. Do we have posted in large enough writing so that people can see a warning that if you have been tested positive, do not come into this building? Something like that?
Well, as you know, we have not opened the town buildings to the general public. The only way you can get into the town buildings is by making an appointment either on Tuesday or Thursdays. Right. And as part of that process, we have a sheet that is filled out when an individual calls in to make the appointment that has a series of COVID-19 questions that are asked before the appointment is agreed to. So we have that process in place. It's working very well. We've done about 19 appointments since we started that back in mid-September. So that's working out very well. In this particular case, the meeting, there was actually 2 meetings with this individual. One took place at a site visit and another took place outside of the annex where the individual was talking with staff as well as getting some information. So it's unfortunate that it did occur, but at least it occurred outside. Staff were wearing their masks, but frankly, they should not have been put in that position where they might be at risk.
If you can say, how did we learn that the individual had tested positive?
We learned because during the site visit, the individual indicated he wouldn't be getting out of his truck, and he said why. And frankly, the site visit never should have taken place. He should not have been out and around.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Any further questions from the board for Dr. Duncanson? Okay, any questions from the public, remote participants for Dr. Duncanson? You can use the Teams app and raise your hand, or you can speak out and I'll note you and call on you. Okay, I'm seeing no, oh, hold on, you see Elaine Gibbs? Anybody else? I'm just gonna scroll down. Okay, go ahead, Elaine. Question for Dr. Duncanson.
Yes, just to follow up on Dean's questions, this is a little hard to, somebody's in a truck, a site visit. I mean, is this a town site visit? Is this a conservation visit? Is this a town resident? Is it somebody from out of town? If we could have a little more data, we're not looking for HIPAA violations, but it's very obscure. And, I think people would like to know if this is something that's really a threat or, how it occurred. If you can just give us a little more data. If we don't ask the right questions, we don't get the right answers. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
It was a town business related site visit. And I don't want to go into any more detail than that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bob. Any other questions for Dr. Duncanson?
Yeah, I have one, Shereen.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Dr. Bob, in general, from a macro perspective, how's Barnstable County doing compared both to the Commonwealth and to the rest of New England? How are we doing down on our spit?
Barnstable County continues to do very well. As we've said all along, the county has done a great job at flattening the curve and keeping it flat. And I think the numbers reflect that. When you look at the state's weekly public health map that they put out of the gray, green, yellow, red, we don't currently have any red communities on the Cape. We have a couple of communities that last week got into the yellow zone. So, I think we'll wait and see what comes out tomorrow. But I think overall the Cape continues to do a pretty good job.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Bob. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, our next is an update from our town manager, Jill Goldsmith. Jill, hi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I don't have much more than what Bob had reported, and just of course, the safety to our employees is of the utmost importance to us. So we have had appointments, and interestingly, we've only had 21 appointments made by members of the public, and 10 of them have been related to town clerk and voting or getting sworn in. So that's very manageable for us. And as Bob had said, we do a survey when we make the appointment, and we track that through the Emergency Operations Center staff. And we had a meeting today with department heads. We call it our quarterly Local Emergency Planning Council, LEPC, which is a technical term for a group that's recognized under emergency management plans nationally. And it's more of a check-in to see, what lessons we've learned, where do we go from here, and what we did feel that we did a really great job with the pivot of moving from a pretty paper-heavy system to electronic meetings, using Teams, regardless of some of the issues I know that some of the committee members are having with using Teams. But we were very fortunate to implement the Teams platform pretty much about a year before we had to issue the emergency order. So that's good. And then also looking at the continuation of how to use that to a greater extent. We also just talked about our supplies and our supply management, and it's a very organized approach, but we're also monitoring the burn rate of all the PPE, and we're in it for the long haul. We know everyone's seeing the same news reports, no matter what channel that you watch, that the fall surge is probably here, and we're just hoping to keep the offices open with staff here as they are available to help the public. And looking at our expenses to date, next week's our budget summit, and a big part of that is our COVID budget and appropriation, considering that some of the federal funding might expire for us. So what we do know is we've spent over $600,000 to date on COVID-related items. That includes workplace safety, additional cleanings of public restrooms, and there's a whole host of stuff that we'll get into next week. But that's going to be a large component of our budget discussion is planning for that Plan B or the continuation of the current conditions for us. So that's it. Again, pretty scary thought about our employee in contact with a person who admitted that they had tested positive, and just reminding everybody, everybody's exhausted and there's some complacency. We all feel it. Just to remain vigilant. I mean, we're all, for employees, we might have 132 employees working for the town, but we also have 132 families, and that's not to diminish the population that we serve, because that's who we want to be here for. So that's it, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jill. Corey has his hand up, and then Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jill, I noticed, well, I was going back to the comment about protecting our staff and understanding things a little bit more clearer. I noticed over the weekend, the transfer station was a little more, I hate to use the term aggressive, but they were about promoting mask wearing. They had the disposable mask at the gate and reaching out to people who didn't have it. And I'm there enough that I definitely saw a heightened outreach by the staff doing that. Can you kind of give a summary of how things have been going? Has it been that much of a problem with people not wearing masks at this transfer station? And exactly what are we asking our staff to do under the circumstances?
So we heard from the Board of Health, who had been at the transfer station, that had said that there wasn't great compliance for people wearing their mask. And so we just did a re-education training with staff. I know that people don't drive wearing masks, but once you get onto the transfer station property, we ask that you do wear a mask unless there's a medical condition as you're driving in, just so staff doesn't have to stop you and remind you to wear a mask. So I haven't heard, if Bob's still on the call, I haven't heard too many complaints, except there was a slew of I guess, concerns that was discussed at the last Board of Health meeting, their observations. And I haven't really heard anything else. If Bob wants to weigh in on that.
No, that's correct. It came up at the last Board of Health meeting. A couple of members of the board had been present and had, I'll say, less than jovial conversations with some people there that were not wearing masks, not staff, but other members of the public. And so we just, at the board's request, I reached out to DPW and the transfer station supervisor and asked them to become, because the board had designated that area, like Main Street, as a mandatory mask zone. So we asked them to just become a little bit more observant of, conditions as people came into the transfer station. So that's what precipitated that.
Okay, well, I mean, they certainly were doing as much outreach as I could. When I went by over the weekend, they were certainly doing outreach and had the disposable mask, and they were trying for sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to go on record as saying that one of my committees, the ZBA, has asked to go back into the annex for meetings, to be socially distant and to do it correctly and responsibly. And I think most folks know I've been pretty much a hawk on this stuff, but I think it's important that we go on record. And Jill, I'd like to have you go on record as to why we're not having meetings in the annex with social distancing and being very careful. And I just want to know kind of if we're being any more conservative than other towns when they're having their regulatory committees meet. That's all. And I think we need to go on record as to why we're not meeting there. So I think we need to go on record and as to why we aren't, and why we're not allowing meetings to go into the annex now. They're getting frustrated with presentations, and it's just kludgy, long and clunky. Yeah.
Yes, so Madam Chair, so with the large meeting room, we're working on upgrades so that there's a potential of having a hybrid meeting, so that the meeting could be live and broadcast live, but also have public participation via the Teams meeting. So it's live participation because of the assembly restrictions that we have in the room. And the other thing that we're concerned about too is, some of our employees have young kids who are in our school system, and we just wanted to, as well as we can, protect them from the in-person meetings having a staff presence there. So it's not that that's the prevailing factor. The more prevailing factor is the technology. And as you might recall, even when we had meetings before the pandemic, back in February or March, sometime there was a looping issue, and it really wasn't a good sound. So that's something that was funded in last year's budget that Channel 18 has worked on, and I don't have the exact status of when that's going to be complete, but I think this does warrant a discussion at a board meeting so that the Board of Selectmen can hear the concerns and then we can update. There's some trepidation about having a live meeting, but I also understand that it is clunky, it's tiresome. I know that a couple of committees have had meetings that lasted 4 hours, and I understand how difficult that is. So I'm happy to put an agenda item when I get more information. So probably within the month, the board can have the discussion, and then you can make that determination for revisiting it, or for you, probably as the first board, if you do want to meet in person.
Got it. Okay, I appreciate that. And I was going to bring it up as an agenda item, but I wanted to have set the context with COVID and ask you now. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I had also received an inquiry from the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I referred Chairman Nixon to Mr. Dykens as well. And so I appreciate the explanation that you just gave, Jill. I do remember that the last in-person meeting that the Board of Selectmen had at the Annex, it was a meeting where there was no one in the audience except, I think, 10 staff people at most were permitted at that time. So if you're working on the technological component to make some sort of a hybrid meeting possible, I think that's a good thing. We obviously want to be careful and sensitive for our employees as well, as you say. I think all of us would like to see the day when we can go back to in-person meetings in some form or fashion. And particularly in the case of the Zoning Board and the Historical Commission, which, as Mr. Messina said, had a very long meeting today. It's very difficult to do those by Team Microsoft or Zoom, because they're looking at plans, they're looking at documents. It's really tough. So I appreciate what you're saying, and perhaps I would suggest that maybe the message that you just gave us could be communicated to the committee chairs, the board chairs, through the staff liaisons to those committees. That might be helpful. The other comment, or I guess a question, you mentioned we've spent $600,000 so far. Have we actually received any compensation or reimbursement from the feds under the CARES Act to date, or are those things we have to apply for going forward?
Yes, I see Alex has her hand up, and she's been submitting them regularly. I think a deadline had just passed where we did a recent submittal. If you want her to speak, Madam Chair.
Sure. And our Director of Finance, Alex Halela. Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Yes, we've had the first round of the CARES Act funds for about $103,000 was received previously, and we have another round due the end of this month, so we'll be applying for additional CARES Act money, probably our full allocation, just in case we don't get FEMA reimbursement for some items that they might deny. So we'll get that in, and then if we do get the FEMA reimbursement, we'll have to refund the CARES Act money, but we'll be putting in for FEMA reimbursement, which is 75% of all the total costs that are eligible. And again, as I said, we have up to $549,000 in CARES Act money, of which we've already received 103.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Any other questions from the board for Jill? Any remote participants would like to ask a question of the town manager related to her COVID update? You can raise your hand, or you can just speak out your name. Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Dr. Duncanson, for your reports. All right, we're moving on to our public comment period. That is our period prior to the board's discussion of their business agenda. And this is where the remote participants may speak to any of the agenda items that are listed in the packet. So I'm going to take ask that if you'd like to speak, you may raise your hand if you have the Teams app, and I'll note your name. And if not, then you may say your name, and I will make a list and then call on you. So anybody want to speak during the public comment period? Okay, we also have one after the business discussion. I see Elaine Gibbs has raised her hand. Anybody else? Okay, Elaine, go ahead and please just note what you're, which item that you're speaking about. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to speak on the project communication protocols and plan. I'm not sure what the scope of that is. My understanding is that was generated because of the Main Street project that is affecting downtown business. One of the points I would like to make is that I looked through the communication that was sent to you about our communication mechanisms, which are press releases, direct mail, Swift 991, Channel 18, et cetera. But those are all after the fact. I think one of the problems with the Main Street project is that there was no notification ahead of time. If people didn't listen to the Board of Selectmen's meeting on October 13th during public announcements, they still don't know that Main Street is going to have all the sidewalks replaced because it was not an agenda item, because it came up at the last minute. I checked over 55 meetings that the Board of Selectmen has had over the last year, and there was no mention of Main Street having their sidewalks dug up and replaced, and no indication throughout this whole COVID thing that this was going to happen. I have no problem with the sidewalks being replaced. I understand it has to get done, but my problem is that it was scheduled at the exact same time that Cross Street is being done. Cross Street is the only alternative route to get in and out of Main Street to avoid congestion that's going to occur at the Rotary for the businesses west of Library Lane. Dean lives there, I live there. If you've seen Cross Street and know what's going to go on for the next 10 weeks, it's not a detour. So in terms of the businesses and in terms of the neighborhoods, I think that that's where the communications are failing. They had to order granite for the curbs a long time ago. Why wasn't this on the agenda? Why didn't DPW come to us and say, we'd like to hear from the public, we'd like to hear from the businesses, we'd like to hear from the neighborhoods to find out what the issues might be. So I would hope that when you have this discussion, you consider postponing Main Street sidewalks. Right now, Cross Street is really in bad shape, and that is not an alternative route. Any businesses that are going to be east of Library Lane, the only way they can get to them is to out Bridge Street, down Stage Harbor Road, Bridge Street, Shore Road, and back down Main Street, or to go Old Harbor Road and back to Chatham Bars Avenue. They're not going to do it. They're going to leave. And we're going into the holiday season. We're going into when families are going to come in, they're going to get COVID tested and they're going to quarantine. They're going to come in through Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we're going to have shoppers, and the businesses cannot tolerate this. So I don't understand why there are no planners, road planners that say, look at traffic studies and say, you can't block off a road and not
Elaine, I think you're getting more into the logistics of the project. We're talking about the communications. Is there a way that you can frame this to include this about communications?
Well, I don't know what the scope of this is because it's very generic. I am just saying that we should have been told, we should have been asked, and I hope when you discuss this, that in the future, when you're going to do something major like this, you let the neighborhoods know and you let the businesses know well ahead of time so that we can weigh in, because we're the ones that are going to have to live with this. And, we've got 2 Board of Selectmen that are downtown, either with a business or residents, and I think they understand where I'm coming from here. This has been poorly handled, and it's going to cause a great deal of consternation, a problem. And again, I don't understand why, I have to speak to it because I don't even know what you're going to talk about. If we could talk during the agenda item, I probably could have been a little bit more concise. So And I'll just wait and see what you come up with and speak at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Sandy Wyckoff has her hand up. Welcome, Sandy.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Oh, that's delightful. Thank you. I think that this probably has to do with the communication, because I think that the discussion has been about communication from the Board of Selectmen or town officials coming out to the businesses and the people who live in the area for the sidewalk work that's being done. But I'm also a little concerned that it really doesn't seem to be a way for us to communicate back. So I'd like to see that there would be some conversation about that. I certainly would agree with everything that Eileen has just spoken about. I don't think our businesses really can handle much more in terms of lost business. And I do think that with the weather being mild, while it's conducive for the sidewalk work, it's also conducive for the businesses. But anyway, getting back to the point, I'd like to have a way where we can express what we want, what we're thinking. And not only that, but is there a way that we could have a discussion about doing a different time frame? I just don't see where there's a place to have that discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. And any other remote participants want to make a public comment at this time in relation to our agenda items? Okay, I thank everybody for their comments, and we're going to move on into our business agenda, and this is a board discussion of items. So our first item of business is Bartholomew, the OPEB Trust, Bartholomew fiscal year 2020 annual review. This is Sharon Drown, our treasurer, and I think we have Alex Bartholomew here as well to make a presentation. And I think Michelle, I see Michelle. Hi, Michelle, is here as well. So Sharon, do you want to kick us off, and then we'll have Bartholomew make their presentation?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject of tonight's presentation is Bartholomew's fiscal year 2020 annual review of OPEB trust and trust funds. Just to provide a little background, Bartholomew and Company Inc. has a locally owned and independent institutional investment management firm located in Worcester, Massachusetts. Bartholomew has been managing trust funds since their founding in 1994 and opened their first OPEB account in 2009. It has been managing the town of Chatham's trust funds since March of 2005 and the OPEB trust since 2013. Alexander Bartholomew, Senior VP, and Michelle Newcomb, VP of Bartholomew and Company Incorporated, are here this evening to present the fiscal year 2020 annual review of the town of Chatham's trust funds and OPEB trust fund. The fiscal impact is interest rates for these funds are dictated by the market. The town receives consistent fiscal oversight and management of trust funds. The current yield for the OPEB trust as of September 30th, 2020 is 2.01%. The ending market value for the OPEB trust as of September 30th is $2,438,970.20. My recommendation is to respectfully recommend that the board vote to approve the fiscal year 2020 annual review presented by Bartholomew and Company.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, welcome, Alexander and Michelle. I'm not sure who's making the presentation first, but welcome to Chatham.
Thank you very much for having us. I just want to say we've been very honored and privileged to work with the town of Chatham since 2005. Our firm is currently over 3 billion assets under management as a firm, and over 1.7 billion assets represent municipal funds that we're investing with over 260 municipal entities across the state. So over $1 billion of that represents the legal list funds, so funds that have to adhere to the Massachusetts legal list of investments, such as trust funds, stabilization, CPA money. And we currently have over $270 million that we're managing in OPEB funds, about 170 OPEB accounts across the state. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex so he can get into the performance of the account and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Just as Michelle said, good evening. Just so I'm making the best use of your time, I'm sure that we can cover a lot of different things this year around the market and the impact from the pandemic. Do you want me to focus on June 30th numbers? I know that you've also been maybe provided with September 30th numbers prior month end, which is more applicable for the review on this recorded message.
What's the feeling here?
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, 6:30, it's our end of our fiscal year is very important.
Okay.
But then I kind of probably a look at 9:30 to see how we fared in the first quarter as well. So
sure, absolutely.
Focus on 6:30 with an update to 9:30. Thanks.
We can absolutely do that. Perfect. So on June 30th of 2020, the OPEB trust approximately $2,285,000. The fiscal year 2020 was obviously a tale of two cities, if you will. 2019 calendar year was a very strong period of returns after the fourth quarter of 2018. Thinking all the way back to the fourth quarter of 2018, we had concerns about economic growth heading into 2019 and disagreements with the Federal Reserve and market participants. 2019 calendar year carried over into the first half of fiscal year 20, right? So July 1st of 2019 through December 31st of 2019 was an extension of the market rebounding, and in response to two things mainly. Number one, that the Federal Reserve Bank did start cutting interest rates as a sign that they were going to continue to support the economic expansion. And on top of that, just better economic release of data than the market had expected. So those two things broadly, to sum up a very large period of time, extended a very strong period of returns. And then obviously as we turned the calendar and we had the first quarter of 2020 calendar year, which is the last half of fiscal year 20, we had kind of a flat and then negative first 2 months, followed up by March of 2020, which is something that, as we say, will be etched in history along with other periods of market volatility, and it will be studied for a long period of time. I don't have to tell you about the impact of the pandemic. You've certainly covered that a lot, right? Just in the impact of us locally, all over the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But the real impacts in the market that we dealt with in that month was really the liquidity crisis. It started out at the beginning of March when the Federal Reserve cut interest rates to zero over 2 emergency meetings without any warning. Which is incredibly unusual. A lot of the commentary around the Federal Reserve is in support of their actions, both how swift they acted and how aggressively they acted to support the markets in the middle and end of March and since then. And their promise to do unlimited actions to support the markets going forward as we deal with this global pandemic. But the thing that really precipitated the liquidity crisis, and what I mean by that is when you're looking at all these investments, whether it's common stock, high grade, low grade fixed income, anything in your portfolio in March, outside of really treasuries, cash, and gold, dropped in value, and for a couple of week period of time. Some of it substantially so. Very high quality investments, AAA rated corporate bonds were down 20% week over week in the middle of March. And the Fed had to step in and effectively start buying, pumping money into the system so that people would feel comfortable buying these securities again. And we, in these types of portfolios, use that as an opportunity to buy into that trade as well. Corporate bonds, where we can see this later in the portfolio holdings in these reviews. Corporate bonds were trading at steep discounts because of the liquidity crisis, and we took capital from the alternatives section of the portfolio to take advantage of that. We've certainly made more trades and more movement in the portfolio this year, based off of what's happening. There is more volatility and bifurcation in the market this year than we've had in quite some time. So as we will see, whether it's the June 30th numbers or the September 30th numbers, our relative performance and even where we are now in September and October, our absolute performance year to date, calendar year to date in 2020, I'm very proud of, and I think you're going to be very pleased with too if you haven't seen it already. So if you're looking at the allocation of the portfolio on page 2 of the reports that we've given you, you're going to see on the right hand side of that graph how we harvested a lot of capital from the alternatives bucket, which is really kind of why it's there. In a period of market dislocation, we don't keep cash on hand. These assets are invested for the next 20 to 30 years. We want them to be fully invested at all times, but we have parts of the portfolio that we can draw on to take advantage of market dislocations, which we definitely did in March and April, and since then. If I move forward onto kind of the summary of the portfolio, the investment activities in that graph on page 3 of 12. As of June 30th, 2020, this portfolio has annualized 5.2% since inception. That is the number that we would recommend on an annual basis to be reported to the state for what you're earning on these assets. And we provide that in an annual mailing every August, along with other materials that are appropriate for auditors and actuaries. Fiscal year 20, the portfolio performed 3.4%. So with the strong period of time in 2019 followed up by the incredibly historic volatility in the first half of calendar year 2020, portfolio was positive. You can even see the dramatic impact that March and April had on this portfolio on the graph below, that if we did not realize such a strong correction in the second quarter, the portfolio is effectively at the value of all the contributions the town has made since inception, erasing all of its cumulative gains in those couple of weeks. And please stop me at any time if you have any questions. I'm going to move on to the performance summary, which is just a little bit greater detail. As of June 30th, 2020, the second quarter rebound versus the first quarter still led us at this point in time in negative territory, down 1.51% for the calendar year, but up over 16% in that second quarter. Again, long-term performance annualized since inception, 5.2%, comparatively to the benchmarks of 5.3, 5, and 6. Not where we want this OPEB trust to be long-term. But as we will see in more updated numbers, a lot has changed in short periods of time this year. In the performance history report on page 5, we have the history calendar year by calendar year of these different markets back to 2013. And as of June 30th, this was the third negative time period on top of 2015 and 2018. In all of these negative time periods, as we set out to accomplish, these portfolios have performed admirably in negative markets, setting us up for positive participation in positive and strong markets. Other smaller adjustments we've made to the portfolio year to date are looking for opportunities to take gains on parts of the portfolio that have had outsized returns. Just as there are companies that have been dramatically negatively affected by the pandemic and the economic shutdowns, there have also been those companies that have been dramatically positively impacted, whether they be in the healthcare sector, the technology sector, Microsoft Teams that we're on right now, and Zoom, all these companies you may have heard of this year, some of which that are just participating in a very strong technology sector rally. Different parts of the portfolio have benefited from that. We have parts of the equity market, and I'm just using index data, that is down 15%, and other parts of the equity market using index data, that is up 25 to 30%. This is a difference between dividend paying value stocks and generically non-dividend paying growth stocks. There are differences domestically versus international. As an American domestic investor with investing in American dollars, international stocks from an index perspective have underperformed domestic, but our international allocation in this portfolio has dramatically outperformed the market and been the single biggest contributor to our relative performance year to date. I believe there was a question, a hand raised. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Alex, I just saw that Peter's hand was raised. Go ahead, Peter.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you, Alex. It's just a simple question towards the front, and it's not necessarily just for me. When you talk about annualized rates and weighted rates, could you explain that for the public? I think it's very important to understand what that really means, especially when you're looking across a very dynamic period of time that's going up and down.
Sure. So the annualized rate of return over any time period, if I'm talking here about since inception, which is October of 2013. So we have just over a 7-year track record, not as of June here, of course, but where we stand today. And that's important because if I were a member of the town of Chatham, I would think that's important because as you put this money aside, instead of spending it in your town budget, you want to make sure that it is meeting the actuarial goals so that some point in time, 20, 30 years from now, just like your pension fund, this can benefit the town by offsetting those budgetary constraints of paying for these benefits to your employees in retirement. That's definitely important. In terms of other time periods, if it is less than a year, it is not annualized. But any period greater than a year is annualized for that time period.
Yeah, and when you talk about the weighted performance, when you talked about the performance history, weighted based on each year or weighted across the board? I'm sorry, I don't. I'm going back to my financial management courses. Go ahead.
Yeah. So these calculations are time weighted. What that means can also be called geometric calculations. What it means is that as the town puts money in or takes money out, the calculations of performance are not affected by that, right? So if you put money in, it doesn't make the performance look higher. If you take money out, it doesn't make the performance look lower. It is unaffected by the cash flows. Certainly, this is an accumulation phase. It is not yet being drawn on to supplement the budget. That'll happen at some future date and time. But if there's any, hopefully that answers your question. But in terms of weight, it does.
I think that's important to understand. But when you go through parts of this, and this is a little bit different than a corporate, but you know the dividends that are being paid, we have some pretty good dividends, is what I could see in here in certain different areas. But also, you're taking a
what would you say?
Which shows.
Say what I did last time.
I think we have somebody in the background.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask that whoever is on speaking behind the scenes here, just to make sure you mute your mic. Thank you. Go ahead, finish, Peter, and then Dee.
Yeah, my point being with that dividends in certain areas, but this is the people's money, and when we've had these wide swings, it would appear to me that you've done a pretty good job of maintaining a positive increase for us in a number of areas. Although I would have liked to have seen 15% in certain areas. But that's thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Selectman Nicastro and then Dunkins.
Thank you. I have a question for Bartholomew and then a question for Sharon. So the Bartholomew question, I think I've asked this in the past, but your portfolio holdings include a category called alternative, and you referred to it a little while before. There are 3 funds there. Can you tell us what types of investments are characterized as alternative as opposed to stocks and bonds?
Sure. In the portfolio as of this date, If you're mentioning 3 positions, it must be the September 30th portfolio holdings.
It
we
is.
have a position of managed futures, which is a trend following strategy meant to provide uncorrelated returns. As you can see, depending on the time period looking at here, it's one of the only positions in the portfolio that has an unrealized loss. We held on to it at the end of March in case there was a second wave down in the market, second leg down in the market, which really never came. Fortunately, we've had a V correction of sorts, as people talked about. In market participants back in April and May, but it certainly hasn't been detrimental to our overall performance. Secondarily, the other position that is longer held in there is a kind of a distressed credit fund. We also didn't sell that in March because we knew the underlying portfolio had been dramatically affected by the liquidity crisis and felt it was more appropriate to hold. If you look at that allocation prior to March, there were more positions in there, 3 more in fact. We used those positions for the capital to take advantage of dislocations we saw in March. And we felt it was appropriate to, especially on the fixed income side, to use that capital to take advantage of investment grade corporate spread blowout, as well as at the same time increasing our exposure to high quality fixed income. So if we did have that next leg down in the market, and the first couple of weeks or the month of April was short-lived, we felt really comfortable that we were overexposed to high quality assets we could then sell to take advantage of a second dislocation in the market. So there's a lot of different investment strategies or exposures that can be part of alternatives. If you bought gold, for example, precious metals, if you bought currencies, all these different asset classes. One of the things that we've talked about and will continue to work on are things like private equity, real estate exposure. These asset classes and depending on how you represent these exposures can help the portfolio both in terms of diversification and long-term expected performance. So if there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to address them. But that's generally what we're doing there. We're trying to provide an institutional quality portfolio, and as part of such, we don't rely specifically just on long-only public equity and long-only public fixed income. We try and take advantage of other diversifying exposures as well.
Thank you. My question for Sharon, a question I believe I know the answer to, but I think it's important for the public to understand. The fund value is for OPEB is 2.4 million approximately. It's almost $2.5 million. And that's largely based on the contributions that have been made out of the annual budget that came out of the, in recent years anyway, out of the overlay, the assessor's overlay. But starting the July 1st of this year, we are starting to receive money from the special legislation that we got enacted that provides a percentage that came out of the former land bank. So I think it's a 1% tax. 1.5%. 1.5% surtax.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to bring in about $500,000 a year.
Correct.
And on top of the annual contribution that's made out of the overlay. And I think that's a significant piece of change that we've accomplished. I don't know if any other municipality has mimicked us yet. I know some were looking into it, because I had a conversation with the OPEB people up in Brewster last year with the town manager. So that's a really good thing. And the other side of that coin is that we gave the taxpayers a 1.5% break. They were paying 3% surtax. Now they're paying 1.5%, and the rest of it is a break on the tax rate. So I just really think that's important for people to know. And that was the genesis of that was the work of the OPEB trustees. They came to the selectmen, they came to the finance committee, and then ultimately town meeting okayed this. So it was a really good thing to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Jeff, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Selectman Castro for that update. That is important for everybody to understand and to be aware of and to be reminded of. I wanted Andrew to know too, and the team from Bartholomew, that actually in our package we did get the 930 numbers. So I know you've been kind of referencing the 630 numbers, Andrew, but we did get the 930 numbers that are fairly impressive. So I just wanted you to know that when you were referring to rates of return and stuff, I was searching around and I realized that we got the 930 numbers. The other point I wanted to make, and I have a question as well, is when we receive our tax dollars that are going to go for OPEB money, so say the 1.5% that's coming in now as folks pay this first charge of taxes and for 21, do you guys take that money, we send that money to you, and then do you dollar cost average over time, or do these, and we have a large mutual fund holdings here, do we like dollar cost average, or do you invest them immediately upon receipt, or how mechanically do the funds go to work for us, I guess is the question. It was a question that was asked at our last OPEB trust meeting with Steve Daniel and Shireen and Sharon and President as well, and Jill as well. So I'd like to have the answer to that question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that's an incredibly appropriate question, especially with the frequency at which you will be contributing. Want to make sure that the portfolio will be handled properly with that frequent contribution. So unlike more plain vanilla mechanisms of, if you're familiar with a 401k where people put every 2 weeks their from their paycheck into the account, those assets get contributed and invested exactly the same way every 2 weeks. Conversely, in this type of situation, every week when that gets contributed, me and my team will invest it based off of our portfolio targets at that point in time. So whatever is the most underweight will receive the most amount of dollars, and over time, that dollar cost average. So we don't take it and spread it across the entire portfolio. Okay. And that's important. If you're doing this every single week, there could be 4, 6, 8, 10 weeks in a row where you tend to be buying the same asset class or the same asset categories. And over time, as you do that over the years, that dollar cost averaging targeted to the parts of the portfolio that are, let's say, lagging the most or underperforming the most, really creates strong compounded returns. And we see that in other client situations that contribute frequently. And it's because we choose to take on that manual process that we're going to benefit from that. The challenge we're going to have is at some point in time when we have securities that we can't transact in but are more illiquid of nature, we're just going to have to come up with plans to make sure that we maintain position sizes appropriately. But anything that we can transact with the click of a mouse, we'll be able to do every single week.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Now, I want folks to know too that the stance that the OPEB Trust has taken is an aggressive stance. So we are, I think it was 80% equities and 20% other, and or some mix, some more aggressive mix slanted towards the equity side, because we believe that we're in this for the long haul and that we'll suffer or go through ups and downs like a market always does, but over the long haul, meaning decade or two, will come out well in the end. And I just wanted you to comment on that, Alex, as a kind of a macro statement on how we're managing these funds for the town.
Absolutely. I'm in complete agreement. Our recommendation for almost every single municipal entity with OPEB Trust is to have the risk profile that you do, which is targeting a 70% equity and 30% fixed income type of risk profile. Obviously, we are using some other asset classes in there so that muddies the water, but that's the general risk profile we are targeting. And also to make a note of the investment time horizon, we talk a lot about 20 or 30 years. That's really the time period at which a lot of communities expect from their actuarial studies to start using the assets to supplement their budget, to start paying for healthcare premiums out of this pool of assets. What I'd like to start bringing up in this meeting and others is these are, just like pension funds, invested into perpetuity. So even though they're going to start being drawn on 20 or 30 years from now, the investment horizon really is indefinite. So as long as you have employees who are promised these benefits in retirement, unless there is a change of legislation and a grandfathering and a line drawn in the sand at some point in time, these will be invested into perpetuity. And so the time horizon is incredibly long.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point as well. You know, we do have a really long time horizon. Our goal, I think, is somewhere between 12 to 16 million with an actuarial calculation. I think that was approaching 19 million the last time you looked, or 18 million. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we'd like to get the corpus, up to between 12 to 16, so we can, we can get the actuaries happy and we can spin off monies but that's going to take some time. But I think we've come a long way since 2013. So
yep.
2.5 million, 2.6 million bucks since 13 is pretty good. And we've made a real commitment in the town to keep funding the trust with the 500 some odd thousand at least every year through the tax rate. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Agreed. I think that all the steps you guys have taken, whether it's the contributions, the funding, the appropriate investing, you're going to see the benefits in discussions with your auditors, in discussion with your credit rating agencies, and discussions with your next actuarial studies.
Right.
Thank you. Sharon, your hand is up.
Yes, I think it's just important for the select board to understand, and the taxpayers as well, that as revenues coming in from real estate tax, as the treasurer, I'm depositing these funds weekly to the OPEB account to keep that momentum going as the revenue comes in.
Good.
So as of today, as of this week, total funds contributed is $91,623.
Good. Good.
Great. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Alex and Selectman Dykens makes a good point. And you have a performance history in the back. I can't see the page number the way I have it flipped. That goes from 2005 when you started, and you follow it all the way down year by year, and it's analyzed and weighted, and also it's a time-weighted return. Interestingly enough, if you start in 2005 and you follow the years down, obviously 2008 was a disastrous year, and I remember that well. That's when I retired, and that was not a fun time if you were in equity. But the point I'm trying to make is, you're using Dow Jones here, and you've used S&P and other values. I think S&P would be relatively close. But the point is, when you get down to your analyzed, after all of that mixing around, we're close to 9%. There's a 9% return. If you had ever pulled your money out at the wrong time during this period of time, you'd never see 9. You'd be in a negative value. So your approach to how we're moving ahead, and as Jeff mentioned, and cost averaging and putting it across a larger number of different kinds of equities. Just because you're in equities doesn't mean that it's aggressive, but it doesn't mean that you're overly aggressive. It means that you're looking at the long term. So I appreciate all the information you put in here, and thank you very much. And I think our OPEB guys have done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further here? Do we want to continue? Anything else?
Well, I think that was
Did
the
you want
OPEB
the-
trust. You want to talk
yeah.
about the Chatham Trust as well?
Yeah, the
Sure.
Chatham Trust.
Yeah.
Sure. And I have that as of June 30th as well.
Yeah, actually, we have it as of 9:30, Andrew. If you have it, that'd be probably more appropriate, because that's what we have in our package.
Sure, no problem. No problem.
Yeah.
So as of September 30th, the trust fund portfolio was 4.85 million approximately.
Right.
Our page 2 of this report is comparing the fiscal year end, which is June 30th in this case of 2020, with the quarter end, September 30th asset allocation. This portfolio, much differently than the OPEB, is a much more conservative, only targeting around 15% in equity, which is net 85% in fixed income and cash. One thing that we're pointing out in this time period in these reviews is that unfortunately, we are back to where we were 2011, 2012 in terms of a zero interest rate environment. The difference is that the 10-year Treasury back in 2011 bottomed out generationally at 1.38%. This year, it bottomed out at 38 basis points. It is actually up to 80 basis points at the close today, which shouldn't be a big deal, but it is. It's really been range bound the last 6 months between 55 and 75 basis points. That is a monumental difference from where we were post 2008. Post 2008, the fiscal stimulus was only $800 billion. Now we're spending $1 trillion at a clip. This impacts monetary policy. This impacts interest rate expectations. It impacts inflation expectations. So operating and investing these funds under the state law, the list of legal investments, the best opportunity we have for return going forward is twofold. Number one, it is in the equity exposure. As limited as that list is, it only includes 22 companies to choose from. And secondarily, the corporate bond exposure. So this is by far and away the highest exposure we've ever had in these portfolios to corporate bonds. Technically, we are taking on credit risk, although they are all investment grade and they all are very short in maturity. We will go out longer in corporate bonds than we will in any other asset class like treasuries and agencies in terms of maturity, up to 5 years. But just as a comparison, the 5-year treasury right now is 33 basis points. We just participated recently in a new issue, high quality Duke Energy bond. I believe it's single or AA plus. And that was issued at 90 basis points. So we're buying it somewhere between 85 and 90 basis points in the primary and secondary market. Compare that to a 5-year treasury at 33 basis points, you're getting a pickup there of 55 to 60 basis points. And this is why it's the largest piece of the portfolio. Over the next 3 to 5 years, we don't exactly know what the interest rate market is going to look like. We should expect that the Federal Reserve is going to keep interest rates at 0 at least through 23 because they've already given us that guidance. And they will do that unless the labor market gets back to full employment and unless we see inflation start ticking up beyond their control, well above their 2% target. We could see the interest rate curve steepen. What I mean by that is overnight lending rates stay at 0, but the 10-year goes from 80 basis points to 1.5. That's technically a steepener. That could indicate that we can get higher interest rates on our universe, higher than they are right now. But we are definitely going to have to pull out every available creative idea we can in these portfolios over the next 3 to 5 years in order to both outperform cash and do the best we can to keep up with inflation. Because at the end of the day, when this portfolio, and I have it up here, I know you don't have it in front of you, but as of the end of September 30th, this portfolio has $2.1 million in stabilization, 1.2 in CPA, and other conservative monies, which is why the conservative stance of the portfolio, the investment strategy is to try and outperform inflation. So if the town, for whatever reason, needs to draw on something like CPA or stabilization, which is 100% expendable at any point in time, it is there, it is conservative, it is liquid, but it is also meaningful in terms of time value of money. We haven't just stuck it in a bank and underperformed inflation over a longer period of time. That may be challenging over the next 3 to 5 years if the Fed stays true to its word, allowing inflation to go above its target. If we're going to be happy with a annualized return on this portfolio going forward, given the interest rate environment between 1% and 2%, and inflation is between 2% and 3%, we're going to realize a period of time that we lag inflation. But we have to understand the assets, we have to understand the risk that it is appropriate, and do the best we can given market environments. All of this, just as everything has in the last 12 months, can change at a moment's notice. We know there's a big event coming up next month. Depending on the outcome, depending on how definitive the outcome is, which is just as important right now, the market is going to tell us what it thinks of the conclusion of the election. There's positive and negative things about each decision. But we are all trying to sit and wait to see what happens. And this could positively or negatively impact the interest rate environment going forward over the next 4 years. Another thing about that, which is always disruptive to monetary policy and market projections, is if Biden does win, who knows if he replaces the Federal Reserve chair in Jerome Powell. And if Jerome Powell gets replaced, there's always a period of time of trying to sort out the new chairperson and where their stances lie to affect policy going forward. One of the things that we started building a position in is Treasury inflation protected securities.
Tips, yeah.
Tips, yep. With our inflation expectations, we definitely want to have exposure to that. And we've bought an exchange traded short tip 0 to 5 year ETF that represents that exposure. So I am on now. I've scrolled down to page 4 of 12. The fiscal year to date, which is just the first quarter, the last 3 months, this portfolio was up 1.12%, 2.48% annualized since inception back to January of 2005. Over a 15-year time period. We have a summary, a breakdown of the credit quality of the portfolio, the average ranges of maturities of the portfolio. So all the government securities are by S&P rating are AA+. Anything that's rated as not rated are just certificates of deposit because they do not get ratings from S&P or Moody's, but they are all 100% FDIC insured. And then everything in between is investment grade corporates. And as I indicated earlier, this is a short duration, short maturity portfolio, 5 years and in. We do keep maturity shorter in treasuries and CDs and tend to take our duration risk when appropriate in corporate bonds and government agencies of different structures.
Good.
The current yield in the portfolio, not that I'm back trying to bounce around, on June 30th was 2.04%. You can see this on page 3. Sorry to jump around here. On September 30th, it was 2%.
Yeah.
Okay, so the estimated annual income has little changed in 3 months. There's 2 reasons for that. Number one, dividend income on the equities is unchanged. It's still incredibly high. It's listed at 3.82% on September 30th. But also that we have a number of positions in these portfolios that will have attractive yields for several years because of the ladder diversified nature. You will start to see that number come down. The reason I want to reference that right now is because when I then flip back to page 6, the average yield to maturity on the fixed income portion of the portfolio only, which doesn't include cash and stock, is only 51 basis points.
Yeah.
So that's 25% of the current yield. That's representative of the prices that the bonds are currently trading at. They're so highly valued that the total return expectation on that part of the portfolio over the holding period is only 0.5%. That makes a lot more sense given in current interest rates. But it is still attractive. So as we hold these bonds to maturity or call, they will approach par.
Yeah.
So the long-term performance, when you look at either the trailing returns on page 7 or the calendar year by calendar year on page 8, long-term performance is competitive with short-term high-grade fixed income and very attractive in comparison to inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index. That is what we're trying to accomplish. We have thus far in year to date. The biggest detractor to performance is actually the equity allocation, which is backwards to what we just talked about in the OPEB because of the limited universe we have to choose from here. All of the types of sectors and companies that have done well year to date in the pandemic are the exact type of companies that are not on the legal list. We have Bank of America, AIG, McDonald's, a number of different companies, Altria, that have not done well this year. It's largely concentrated in old dividend-paying blue chip companies like Procter & Gamble, Kimberly-Clark, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, but also healthcare companies. And you would think that would be a good thing, but the healthcare companies that we can buy, Merck, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, have not kept up with maybe the ones that are more in the news. Moderna of the world, which is a Boston-based company. These are, this list is as we talked about before, it is limited, and it's one of the reasons why we are cognizant of how much we own in a portfolio like this that has so much in stabilization and CPA. We want to complement the bond portfolio, not turn it into a balanced approach, unfortunately, because we want to make sure that we're staying safe with the liquidity of the underlying basket. I think that there's a big story to tell here on page 8, which is the performance history, the calendar year by calendar year. Look at the last 3 years. 2018 down 50 basis points. 2019 up 6%, and then year to date we know everything that's happened, up 1.31%. So the volatility of the last 3 years has been, whether it's equity volatility or interest rate volatility, has been either running hot or cold. And all through that, your 3-year annualized return is 2.4%, which is almost on top of long-term averages of 2.48. So the volatility of the last 3 years has been up and down, but it's averaged out about the same as you have long-term anyways. It's just an interesting note to make, an observation. So I can certainly get into any types of individual securities. When you look at starting on portfolio holdings on page 9, on the left-hand column, you'll see the initial purchase date. All of the types of bonds that we've bought year to date, you're going to see a lot in the corporate bond section, and you're going to see the interest rates on those. We have bought a lot of floating rate, whether it's floating rate corporate bonds, treasuries, agencies of different structures that we think have offered attractive pricing and yields, but also limiting our interest rate risk if we do have a yield curve steepener, between now and the end of the next 3 to 5 years. So I'll stop there. Yep. and see if there's any questions.
Questions, Jeff?
Yeah, just a comment. When you look at the difficulty of managing this particular type of portfolio, because it needs to be the purpose of this portfolio is for liquidity and safety, and it's very difficult to kind of get yield in this interest rate environment. So when I look at the holdings and I look at your approach, I think it's very appropriate, and I think you're spot on. I think you're doing a good job. Yield's very difficult to come by, and with 10-year at 80 basis points these days, and that's gone up even over the last week or so. But I like the fact that you're not taking on a whole lot of risk here, and that you're keeping this portfolio liquid, which is what you ought to be doing. So I think you're really sticking to the knitting, and I think you're doing a good job.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions from the board? Great. Okay. Anything else from you, Alex, that you want to add?
No.
Okay.
I think we covered both portfolios. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you.
Good.
Yes,
Good job.
thank you for the presentation. It was really, really good and helpful, and good job. And yes, go ahead. I hear Dean.
I'll offer a motion to approve. Is that the correct language, Sharon, or accept? You wrote approve. You're muted.
Motion to accept.
Yeah. I'll second that.
Okay.
Motion to accept the annual review presented by Bartholomew and Company for FY 2020.
And we have a second from Jeff, so I'll take a roll call vote. Dean?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
And chair says aye. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you all.
evening.
Thank you, you too.
Look forward to
Look forward to
seeing you in the annex someday again.
I know.
Take care. All right.
Good night.
Good night. Okay, so our next item is a community Halloween event update. And just briefly, I don't know if Jill wants to weigh in on this. I know that she wasn't on the call that we had, our final call, but we also know that I think Chief's here, Dr. Bob's here. But Jill, there you are. Hi, Jill.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chairman. So essentially, I think after a few conversations and a recent meeting that you had as a group and invited Tim Wood to attend, that we decided that we weren't going to hold a local event and then direct our resources over to some of the neighborhoods or the neighborhood that primarily gets the most amount of trick-or-treaters. And again, trick or treating is under the CDC guidelines under COVID. And I think today's discussion or tonight is in follow-up to last week when we were contemplating what we could do. Had some good suggestions, but I think the resolve was to just provide our resources to the neighborhood. So I'm happy to turn it over to someone else for details.
Okay. On the call, I can give an update unless Dr. Bob wants to give it, because he was primarily the resource person for on the call. Bob, do you want to weigh in, or do you want me to just continue? I think I will. There's no response. So we had a call with fire and police and the EOC team to talk about supporting certain neighborhoods and how we could do that, given that there's traditional support from the chief, from the police department in certain neighborhoods. What we're going to be offering is some signage and some pamphlets to be handed out to area residents on how to safely practice, according to the CDC guidelines, a trick-or-treating, as well as signs to create some directional one-wayness into this neighborhood in order to keep people safe. I think that I wasn't sure if we did actually decide to have additional Board of Health or volunteers there, but it was mentioned in the call. And we decided to go ahead with this kind of support simply for the fact that we had heard that there was interest within the neighborhood on doing, continuing to have trick-or-treating activities there. There is, I think there was some discussion from the superintendent. Jill, did we get an email saying that there was some sort of other alternative plans that may be being planned by the high school or middle school? I can't recall. Maybe Corey knows. Corey, do you want to speak to that?
The only thing that I've been made aware of is over in Harwich on the 31st from 4:30 to 6:30. The class of 2024 is actually doing it's a slightly different type of an event. It's a fundraiser event, and it's going to be a drive-through trick-or-treating event over at the high school, where cars will drive through. You have to wear a mask even if you're in the car, and you can pick up candy at the Oak Street location, the high school location. But this is a slightly different event because it's a fundraiser event. So that is the only thing that I'm aware of as far as the schools go, and that's going to be held in Harwich. So nothing in Chatham.
That's
Also,
my recollection as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure exactly how that went. Well, one of the things we did talk about, and I think the community needs to understand, that there is the personal responsibility side to trick-or-treating and encouragement that within the guidelines to do alternatives to perhaps trick-or-treating and doing some things at home, or having fun games and neighborhood activities that are more inclusive to your own family units. I know that Tim, I don't know if Tim's on the call or not, or if he wants to speak to anything in regard to this, or if any of the safety folks want to say anything, or Jill. But we're supporting whatever activities are going on in town as best we can, and encouraging people to take personal responsibility and be safe in their practices during Halloween. Any other comments, Jill, on that, or no?
No, I don't see, Tim Wood was on earlier. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
I think Dave is on.
Chief, are you there? Pasquale?
I am.
Hi. Is there anything
Yeah,
further you want to add to this?
Well, I think the last communication we got from one of the neighborhoods in town was that only 6 of the 32 houses were going to participate. I just think this is a personal responsibility thing, and parents and their kids, and they have to do what they think is safe and do what works for their family. We have put out all the guidance that we can. I know Dr. Bob has put out flyers to some neighborhoods that are very popular, or is going to tomorrow. And I just think that this is a parental thing more than anything else. You know, we were willing to do something at the beginning and try to do something as a town, but, you know, one of the neighborhoods was on board with still going forward, so we nixed us doing anything. But I just think that, you know, parents have to make their own choices, you know, as far as what they feel is safe for their kids, and that's where we go.
Okay, thank you. I think we're all sort of on that same page here. Does the board have any questions for Jill or I, or comments in regard to the community's trick-or-treating and Halloween activities? Corey?
Just a general comment. I understand where we are with timing and positioning and resources, and I completely agree that it kind of falls on responsibility of individual households and neighborhoods and whatever. I would assume that we are going to have, you know, a slightly heightened on-call presence because Halloween is on a Saturday this year, and hopefully things will be smooth and things will go well, and those who trick or treat will trick or treat well, and the alternative events will pan out and whatever. But you know, it being on a Saturday, that we are prepared for, you know, an influx of situations. God forbid. I'm assuming that.
Police and fire were on the call, Corey, and they talked about the support activities that they traditionally do on any given Halloween, you know, especially if it's a Saturday. So those were discussed, as well as additional support for the neighborhood. Again, it's, you know, low key downsizing, you know, considering alternatives. You know, certain neighborhoods have had a number of people trick-or-treating through there, and more numbers than we actually have children in Chatham. So I'm hoping people are looking at their activities and saying, hey, let's do something as a family this year, and forego or downsize their trick-or-treating activities a little bit. I also want to say to people that don't want to participate in the CDC guidelines, it's recommended that, you know, you turn off your lights and you know, just indicate you're not welcoming trick-or-treaters in your neighborhood. And for those who are, that they are doing something that maintains, you know, socially distancing and have really fun decorations and get into it. But really, I think it's a family's responsibilities need to be first and foremost here in safe practices. And everybody needs to be wearing a mask with their mask. It shouldn't just, don't use your mask as your costume mask as a protection. Use masks. Any other comments from? None? Okay. All right. Okay, well, that's our update. Thank you, Chief Pasquale, and thank you, Jill. Okay, so our next is consider request for an outdoor sale of goods from John Hutchinson to have a sale of goods at 400 Main Street. Shauna had put together in our packet that Mr. Hutchins has, and I think he has done this in the past, is requesting permission for the board to sell his children's books outside of 400 Main Street on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays during shop hours from time permitted through the end of the year. So I think what we need to do is hear a little more. Is Mr. Hutchinson on the call at all?
John is on the phone. Are you there?
We are. John, would you like to say something about your proposal?
Thank you, Shannon. Is this
Go right
Shannon
ahead.
or
No, this is Shireen. This is the chair of the Board of Selectmen.
Thanks,
Okay.
Shireen.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Some of you may know me from the past, my past attempts to sell my books, and some of you may even have read one of my books. I've written 3 of them, and I have sold them here and there throughout the town in the last 4 years. Currently, I am connected with the Color of Chatham at 400 Main, and Barry has agreed to allow me to sell my books at his place of business. And I am seeking permission to be able to do that. He, unfortunately, and it is not the most advantageous spot in town to be selling my books, as traffic tends to diminish as you go out from the center of town. But it's right now, it's the best I can do. And I am hoping that you will allow me to sell my books.
Okay, thank you. I see that you did have a tentative approval from the property owner as well as from the proprietor outside, the business owner.
That's correct.
Mr. Desilets, sorry, of the Colors of Chatham. Tell me a little bit about how you're going to set up, how you're going to safe distance and all of that. Did you put together any kind of action plan around being safe with COVID protocol?
In case you're not familiar with the layout there, the entryway to his store has a white picket fence around it. And I'm proposing to set up my table on the store side of the picket fence. I then will do my best to attract possible buyers, and rather than sell them as I have in the past directly from my table, I have got the idea that if we can sell them, if I can do my pitch outside and have Barry sell them inside, it might benefit him greatly by getting customers who might not otherwise walk through his door a chance to go in and at least as they buy the books, maybe see something else that they would be interested in purchasing. I have no problem selling them from my table. I would like to help Barry when possible.
Okay.
Possible.
Okay.
So-
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I would set up outside the store with a mask and try to attack customers who either walk by on the sidewalk or pass by in going into Barry's store, and make my sales pitch when possible, and let them buy as they will.
Okay, thank you. Just another question for you. What are the hours of operation for the Colors of Chatham? Do you know?
Well, they vary. During the week, he's not open Monday, but he's open. I think he might not be open Tuesday, but he's open Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I suspect he'd be open on holidays as well.
Okay. Questions from go ahead.
I think he's open from 10 or 11 to 4 or 5, depending on the day.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hutchinson from the board? Anybody have any questions? Anybody want to make a motion on this issue? Peter, your hand is up, but you are muted. Peter.
There was a comment in the package that asked about the holidays and which holidays that they would be and what the timing is. Do you have an idea of what that would be? Because it's part of the motion.
I'm not sure I understand your question, Peter. Let me tell you.
The point was made that you'd be selling on holidays, but there was no definitive description of what holidays and when you would be open to do that.
Well, I can imagine that over the Halloween weekend, there'll be people, and then basically when there will be some potential buyers in town. Thanksgiving, Christmas stroll, if there's going to be one, or whatever is going to be happening then. Halloween. I would have, had I been able to do it, I would have given it a shot over Columbus Day weekend, but
Okay,
we were not set up to do that.
thank you. Any further questions from the board? Well, I don't have any questions, but I do want to make a note that the applicable bylaw has been interpreted in the past to exclude purely commercial sales, but the board in the past has granted other, Mr. Hutchinson and other authors to be able to do this at other places of business. It seems more of a promotional outside event that drives people into the shop to make the purchase. I'm just wondering if there's no other questions, whether anybody has an inclination to make a motion on this request. Nobody? Anybody?
Well,
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, I don't recall whether Mr. Hutchinson in the past, whether we asked him the question. You just outlined a rationale for being able to do this, sort of consistent with the spirit of the bylaw. But I seem, in the past, we've asked various people who want to sell books or other merchandise, whether there's a portion of that that's going to a portion of the proceeds that's going to a nonprofit, for example. And I don't recall whether we ever asked that question of Mr. Hutchinson. And I don't know whether he has anything to say on that point. In the proposed motion that Shauna put together, it does have a space to insert dates, I guess, for holidays. And Mr. Hutchinson mentioned the Christmas stroll. So, and that's going to be very different this year. So I don't know what to insert there, but I mean, I'd be inclined to offer a motion, but I'd be curious if he has any comment on the points that I just raised.
Mr. Hutchins, are you participating in any profit sharing with a nonprofit for your book at all?
When I was involved with selling my books in front of the Cape Cod 5-cent savings bank, I had an agreement with them that I would donate a percentage of my sales to a charity of their choice, which that arrangement worked out very nicely. Other places that I have sold my books have taken 40% of my sale, each book's sale. When I sell my book for $20, 40% of that is $8. It costs me $8 to print a book and get it into my hands. That leaves me with a margin of $4 per book, which is precious little and has been precious little for the amount of work that I do. So no store has ever asked me for an additional donation to a charitable cause.
Okay, thank you. Thank you on that. And can you, per Selectman Nicastro's request, give us an indication of the holidays? I know that you mentioned Halloween and Thanksgiving that we could insert into the motion if we needed to. Is there any other holidays that you were interested in participating in that you wanted specifically to be mentioned? Because they may be outside of that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday sort of date specific.
Well, I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I don't know when Christmas falls or when the Christmas stroll, if there is one, would fall. But if my body can take it, I would do it at Christmas time and at New Year's.
Okay.
As well.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Does that help, Dean?
Well, the draft motion says until December 31st, so it wouldn't cover New Year's Day unless we add that in. We also would need to know the start and closing time, because those are left blank as well, for when you would start selling and when you would closing. I guess the last question I would ask, Shauna, I don't think is on the call at this point, but Jill, whether we've ever heard any complaint or criticism from any of the merchants downtown who have brick and mortar stores in terms of whether this is fair to them or not. I'd like to know the answer to that question as well, if we have one.
Well, I can tell you no one has ever approached me.
The question is to the town manager, Jill.
I don't recall hearing any complaints. I think Sean is still on the call if you want to weigh in.
Yes, I don't recall any specific complaints about the authors. Just bring it to the board's attention as mobile vending again becomes more and more requested downtown.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I think Jeff had his hand up. Did you still want to speak, Jeff? Peter, then Corey.
I just wanted to make the point that we have approved these requests before. There's a history of our approval, so I understand why Mr. Hutchinson's here. I think, weekends is fine. Friday, Saturday, Sundays is fine. And if you could just elucidate, how many other dates he really wants until December 31st, it's only for another 2 months. So I'm good with it as it stands. I think the board's looking for a little bit more clarity on the exact dates. I'm good with Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and other dates surrounding holidays as appropriate until December 31st. And we have approved these in the past. So I'm in favor. I would move it if you want a motion.
Okay. Let's hear from Peter and Corey first, and then we'll get a motion. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My only comment was that I think Mr. Hutchinson mentioned that the store opens either 10 or 11 o'clock, and I think 10 to 5 is not an unreasonable time, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I don't know if we have to have an exact date if we say Thanksgiving, Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. I think that would be sufficient, the days of.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I agree with Jeff.
Okay, so we formulated some sort of structure here. Corey?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I have no opposition to this particular request. I've been a downtown merchant for 20 years. I don't think there's been any major complaints on most vendors, but I do think, and I'm just going to put on a side, I do think we should probably in the spring kind of revisit this conversation because, I appreciate Mr. Hutchinson coming forward and making requests, but frankly, over the years, we've seen other vendors or entities selling things on Main Street in the area, going back as far as I can remember. And it hasn't really created an issue, and maybe there's been years that it has created an issue, but they've done it. So I guess the long-term goal is to have an equitable plan for anyone doing this, and a clear process of what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do. And so on this particular application, I'm supportive. Mr. Hutchinson has set up on Main Street before. He's coming forth again. He's trying to do it through the right process, and I will support the request this year.
Thank you. Dean, go ahead.
Just wanted to ask Mr. Hutchinson, are you okay with the 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., or does that work for you?
Absolutely. It probably wouldn't start at 10 anyway. There are not many people on the street at 10.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm supportive of this as well, and I remember the most recent 4th of July parade. We had selling staff who had never come to the town. At least Mr. Hutchinson has wanted to come before the selectmen. This is not the first time, so I'm supportive of it as well. I don't know who wants to make the motion, but
anybody prepared for a motion?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I move that the board approve the request for a permit for the outdoor display and sale of goods for sales by John Hutchinson of his books to be conducted outside of 400 Main Street on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. until December 31st, 2020.
I do have a second on that motion.
Second.
Okay, I heard Dean did the second. All right, we'll take a vote. Peter,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Dean,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. Okay, you're all set, Mr. Hutchinson. Thank you very much for your time tonight. And good luck with your project. Yes, good luck with good luck with your project. Okay, we're moving along to project communication protocols and plans. This came up, we were talking about how the town was communicating different projects. Last week we had an update from the town manager and on construction projects in town with the director Temple. And when we were going through various issues and things that were being discussed, thought it was appropriate that we put together a project communication protocols and action plan of what we're doing and what potentially we could be doing. And so Shauna and Jill and a little bit from me, we sort of put together the different venues in which people can get information. And we thought we'd have a discussion about that and then sort of some of the issues around that and then what we can do better or improve upon. So Jill, did you want to do a little overview of this? Is that appropriate, or do you want me to go through the list?
Certainly, I'll start. So in your packet, you have a memo that it notes the current channels of our public information. And I can't say that we're really fortunate to have a really great relationship with the local media as well as the Chamber of Commerce, and they both help us out, especially over the last few months under COVID electronically. That's been key for us. And so we have press releases. We regularly do those in advance or after a selectmen's meeting to get the information out there. Not all of it is specific to selectmen's actions. We take a lot of what's in the town manager's monthly department reports that you see and build upon that to get more current items. But a lot of what we do and through our planning process is out there. And so I think with this, and I can go through the rest of the items too, is trying to get an idea from the board of what protocols you would like to put in place. We don't have a protocol or plan in front of you. This, as a first step, we wanted to just almost inventory what we currently do and then hear from you what your preferences are moving forward. And we can also get samples from other town or cities who have these protocols in place. Direct mail was recently used for the sidewalk project, the Main Street sidewalk project from Library Lane to the Rotary and back from the Rotary to Cross Street. And what we found challenged about that is the addresses that we had on file were property owners. It didn't necessarily mean it was the businesses or a rentor. So since then, and working with the chamber directly, we do have all the businesses that are in the project area. We have email addresses, contact information, and their hours of business that's already been forwarded to the contractor so that if there is communication needed, they know how to reach out. And also, as arranged today with Mary from the Chamber and DPW, there's also a contact phone number for them to call at DPW so that we can log the calls coming in as well as email addresses, and that would be for Tom Temple. So I know this is pretty specific to the Main Street project, but you've seen information come out usually Fridays for the sewer construction projects. If there's any changes, we use our police and fire social media. We don't at this time have a strong social media presence. We don't have our own town Facebook page. And so that's something that's in the works. Part of the difficulty for us as a municipality is that we have to archive the information. So it is considered public record. So it's a matter of doing that. And other towns have done that. We just haven't really had the capacity to do it. So I think with everything being upgraded through our website and some staffing redirection, I think that's really feasible. And then what we used more during the COVID state of emergency is the Swift 911 reverse notification. So I know the chairman had used it to reach out to community members on a status of various COVID protocols or what was coming before the board. And I also used it to reach out to staff. We have a staff group. So that's a phone call, text, and an email that's available. And then that system, Swift 911, has just been upgraded. So we're working with the vendor on that to provide various alert messages. And unfortunately, though, this does rely on people subscribing to it. So you'll see in all of our emails and information we do put the information there for people to subscribe to the Swift 911 notifications. And originally it was purchased to address, water main breaks. And the cool part about the upgraded technology is we can actually, using GIS, can map out the area that we want to contact and those residents or businesses in that area. And then, Channel 18 does a fabulous job. We've really done and come a long way in the last 5 months with our graphics, our upgrade to Channel 18, the bulletin board, the production staff, the productions by staff have really been phenomenal. And so that is a mechanism, the bulletin board on Channel 18, and people do watch it. We have some data on it, and I think with the upgrade sound, high def, and the graphics, I think it's something to watch. And the town project webpage, our website, is in the process of being upgraded as well. We had funding allocated this past town meeting for this current fiscal year. And that's where Craig and Ryan, as well as various town employees, are leading that effort to at least get the data culled and inventoried. And then I think what people will see with the website, it's much more intuitive once launched and easier to access and more accessible for people. And then we also have our board, committee, and commission meetings. This is something that Chairman Davids had asked us to put into the memo about subscribing to those meetings. Meetings are starting to resume. However, some meetings are not actually going to be on the date that they traditionally have been. So we have an upcoming airport commission meeting that will be on October 28th. And that was through working with staff to get the commission members trained and availability to have the meeting broadcasted live. That's the date that was selected. So it deviates from when they were meeting. They were on Tuesdays, the same night as the Board of Selectmen's meeting, since we changed, and they're looking for a new date. So there's not that conflict with us or the planning board. And the town manager community update newsletter. We have a pretty robust email list to send it out to, and it's posted to the website. And we're trying to work on ways to get a broader distribution of that. And I saw in your goals and objectives, many of you had mentioned that as well. So we're working on that. And a lot of the information, which is weekly, parlays into the monthly COA newsletter. And so the COA component is really important for us. They have their own set of subscribers through their My Senior Center application. That's for users who register, and then they do a mailing of their newsletter and also send it out electronically. And again, social media rec, the police department, fire department, and we as well will have a town website, a town media account, as well as kind of I guess working closely. We don't have a Twitter account, so again, we're just trying to figure out how to do that under what we're required to do as a local government with our records retention and open meeting law. And then I mentioned it starting out, just the great relationship that we have with the chamber and them using their constant contact and the merchants and getting information out. So I think that's it. I kind of meshed the future agenda, the future channels with the current channels. And again, welcome your input on moving forward, and having that set protocols, I think, would be really helpful for us so that the public and you and staff will have that expectation in hand of here's a project coming up, what's our requirements for notification and getting the word out. With this Main Street project and Cross Street, we knew it was going to be after Columbus Day, but we didn't know exactly when because of the contractor waiting to get some of the material. So I guess just to reiterate, the Main Street project, sidewalk project, will begin on Monday, October 26th. And Cross Street today, they basically tore it all up and did some work. And I think it's a pretty quick turnaround with Cross Street, but we'll try to get that schedule out there on the town project website. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Jill. Dean, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just bought new tires for my car, so Cross Street being done is happy news to me. I just wanted to ask Jill, back to the direct mail. I mean, I received as a resident of Shattuck Place, I received a letter from the town maybe 10 days ago saying that this was going to happen. You mentioned that letters went out on the Main Street project as well, but you didn't have the addresses of all the tenants, I guess. But that you now have email contact information, which is being provided to the contractor. So I guess wanted to know going forward, and in light of some comments that we heard during the public comments section, and also the public announcement section of today's meeting. In addition to the contractors having this contact information, will now that the town has these addresses, these email contacts, will we be sending direct letters or email communications to all these people at the town level first before the contractor gets that information and has to contact people, when he or she needs to? I'm just wondering what in this instance, it sounds like we sent letters out. Not everybody received them because we didn't have everybody's addresses, but now we do, and that information is in the hands of the contractor as he makes his way forward on that project, 300 feet by 300 feet. But are we going to continue to just give the contractor that information, or are we going to send email communications to everybody now that we have that from the town in advance of the contractor doing
Yeah,
that?
and I don't know yet because we just got everything today, and the only information I have is what Tom Temple had provided me for last week. So they're doing their project team meetings, but we certainly have that same email group, so we can send out information as soon as it becomes available. We wanted it for the contractor, who we know the person who's going to be the local lead on that from the contractor. And we wanted to make sure that they have that information in case there's any delay, but we can certainly, and again, we'll probably figure this out within the next day or two. And the local person, I gave the chamber the contact name, but information will come back if there's questions through the town. So we can certainly send something out. It's just, I'm not sure when I'm going to get the information. And as you said, it is about 300 feet. It's a 1,700 foot project. Again, that's on the project page, and that's the technical stuff that Tom has. So yes, we can definitely do it. It's just right now everything is gearing up, and all I do know is that they're saw cutting on the 26th and the 27th, and where they're going to start, how far they go. And that was the information that I provided to the chamber of where they think they're going to go, the contractor is, and hopefully it's intuitive for the businesses, but certainly we're committed to getting the information out there.
Well, I just really want to emphasize that because I really think it's important for the residents, the businesses, to hear directly from the town up front. As I remember 2 years ago, they were doing work on Shattuck Place, my end of Shattuck Place. Shattuck Place has been worked on for about 2 or 3 years now. And I don't think we received any letters from the town or any communication from the town. Lynch was here, and they're very good. They feel good about informing each group of neighbors as to what they were planning to do for the next day or two, so we could park our car somewhere else. We couldn't get out of the driveway. But I really do think that it's important for the town, for people to hear from the town, that this is the project that's going to take place over the next couple of weeks. You're going to be hearing from the contractor, Lawrence Lynch. Here's some contact information. So I want to emphasize. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Thank you, Dean. Corey, your hand was up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I frankly don't know where to start with this because this is such a broad discussion, could be a broad discussion. I know this, the downtown curb sidewalk project was kind of what initiated this conversation. And yeah, as I've disclosed before, I'm a downtown merchant. I don't think the direct mailing was a wise mechanism to use. I was very frustrated with that. It was sent out to property owners just short of a long weekend. And over the weekend, news came forth to the tenants and other property owners about what was happening. So I do think we can do better. We have to do better. I look back at, the time I've served on this board, and there's been multiple projects where we've had some kind of communication breakdown or outreach issue or lack of outreach issue. And, when we get all the emails and comments coming toward us as board members, with complaints, and I think we need to address that. I think we have certain tools available to us. Yes, we have the social media. If we can get this, for the downtown area, if we can get more an email mailing list together that we could use as a mechanism, I think that'd be beneficial. But we got to find a way to do the outreach, and also figure a way to follow through, make sure that everyone's accountable for all the things that we've put in place. Again, like I mentioned, this was more geared toward the downtown project, but this afternoon I had a visit at my shop today, and it bothered me, and I got to get it out there. This person was very clear about all the broken promises in the West Chatham area. Some of the lack of signage and that would assist the businesses in that area, and that it is, the West Chatham project continues to be a thorn in certain businesses' side, that we haven't done the follow through that we promised. And it was a lot to digest, a lot to process, and I feel for them, and I get the frustration. So, and I didn't go through the archives for specific, this was promised on this date, this was promised on that date, but the general tone is they were right. So I want to figure a way with all these, we have a lot of projects on the books right now, how we figure a way to communicate, how we deal with accountability, how we deal with resolving issues. So we're not running around, because we know these projects got to get done. The downtown project, no one downtown, is going to be thrilled when these projects happen. But it has to get done. It has to get done in a timely manner. I accept that. And one of the reasons I'm frankly not, complaining so much about it is because I know it's going to be about a 10-week project. And I drive through West Chatham on a daily basis, and I look through all the stuff they've gone through. They continue to go through. So I'm very cautious about me complaining, for 10 weeks when West Chatham has been hit hard left and right. So we have to find a way to improve our outreach, our communication with our public, because it seems to be a deficiency we've had on multiple projects, as long as I can remember over the last couple of years. So I just want to stress, I don't know how broad of a discussion you want to get into tonight, but for the moment, I just want to stress how important it is that we have better communication. We've identified certain mechanisms that we can use to do that, but we have to improve this, because I think a lot of people would find it very helpful if we could find a way to have that better outreach and communication and follow through. I think would make a better community plan. So those are my initial thoughts, but like I said, I don't know how broad of a discussion you want to get into tonight.
Thanks, Corey. I have a question for you, because
Yes.
you're here and you're downtown, and you are the people we need to know this from. Mm-hmm. When you say we need to find a better way, well, what way do you want to get information as a business owner in town during a construction project? Because I think it would be really helpful for everybody to know what your thoughts are on this.
Oh, I think this email list that has been put together by the chamber and the merchants could be one of those assets, because, I'll be blunt. I was a little irritated that, I recall at a Board of Selectmen meeting, we got the update on the road projects. And when Seaview Street was mentioned, my ears perked up. I'm like, okay, I should pay more attention to this, especially on the board. So, and the next communication I received was a mailing as a property owner just before the Columbus Day weekend. Over that weekend, other businesses are kind of going, what's going on? I heard about this, so all the worst fears start spinning. Offices are closed. But if we could have some kind of timely email response, we as a merchant need to put our responsibility out there. We want to get on these lists. We want to keep tabs ourselves. So just, we got to take responsibility too. But I think this email mechanism, a master list of some sort with some timely communication and updates, I think it's great. I know the response that was sent in response to, the specifics of the downtown project, they were detailed, but also there's a clear understanding that it's going to be based on weather and availability of products and such. So there's going to be clearly some flexibility in what can and can't get done. But I think we need to work with the chamber and the merchants for the downtown area. Maybe reach out to create some kind of business list and put the burden on some of the businesses to kind of be part of the solution. But we got to kind of think outside the box, because it seems to be, and maybe I'm stretching this a little bit, but it seems to be when we have a project, there always seems to be some kind of level of issues that we didn't communicate properly or adequately or with the right people. And in some cases, maybe that's not the facts, and we got to accept that. It gets stretched a little bit, but I do think communication has been kind of a hot topic buzzword that has happened in multiple projects that we've been dealing with over the years. So I'm accepting the fact that we got to do a better job.
Okay, thanks for that. Jeff, your hand was up next, and then Peter. Jeff, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I just was fumbling with my unmute. I just have to do a better job around communicating projects. So part of the list for a project, and I think we do a pretty good job everywhere else. I went down the list. I was fairly impressed with all the different venues and avenues of communication that this town does and has at its disposal, having, using every avenue. But I think with projects, I think we need to have baked in to the project checklist communication plan for each project. And I think that gets it done. But I think we have to do that. Just need to bake in that, 2 months before these projects get launched, when we know they're a go. And I know maybe with Main Street, we didn't quite know when it was a go because of material supply and timing of material supplies, et cetera. And, we got to let folks know what's going on. And we do. And so baked into any project plan is a communication plan and a timetable that we adhere to as best we can. And I don't know how we can do any better. Now, the asphalt plants work, only so many months of the year, so we gotta strike while the iron's hot. I get it. So I don't know whether there's a better time to do downtown versus another time or not. West Chatham is West Chatham. It's coming along. It'll be a short-term pain for long-term gain, I think, but others feel differently. But we gotta work around the asphalt plants. I know that, and the sidewalks are a mess. So we got to do them sometime. So I think some of us need to be somewhat forbearant as well. Totally get the need to communicate. Totally get the need if folks were blindsided that they were surprised that's not good. It's unfortunate and not called for. However, I think if we bake in a communication plan with every project that we've got cooking here, we'll be able to do a better job. Those are my immediate thoughts. I think.
Thanks, Jeff. I agree with you. I also think that there's a avenue to be able to do something in a visual way that can help people look at where the schedule's at and what the expectations are on that project going forward on a little more, I don't know, like a Gantt chart or something like that. I think Peter's probably going to speak to that a little bit. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Jeff. I'm going to make a couple of comments first and then go over some of my other thoughts, because this doesn't have to be rocket science. Communications is always a problem. It's always an issue. And if you're not ahead of it, then you have real issues. My first comment is this is an agenda item that has to do with the protocol plan and what we're going to do with it. It's kind of not that we can't discuss specific projects and what they impacted in, but to talk about changes in schedule is not really part of what we could do here, at least in my humble opinion.
Yeah. No.
Let's take a step back. We have a number of ways to get things out, and it's you look at it, and it's it is a lot of good stuff, and there's a lot of things that are being done, and there's a lot of messages that are getting out there. But I think that if we're going to look, and that it works for individual, if you have a problem with an emergency, we had a tornado. I mean, I thought communications was super. We have COVID. Our communications is getting out there fine. We look at our capital things that we're involved with in any of our construction or other things. It's not just downtown. If you have construction sewers all over the place, we're still going to have a communication issue. Seems that we have that down pretty well. Now that we have an improved Channel 18 and a GIS system, we should be able to do this much better, as the town manager said. But talk about subscribers, and I think that's very important. I received a whole number of calls when COVID was first starting, saying, town manager is telling us about, supposedly speaking about COVID-19, but I don't know anything about it. Well, they weren't signed up. So part of communications is communicating the fact that people have to sign up, and we have to reinforce that fact. The other point is, I think Jeff is right on. He stole my thunder in a way. If we have a project and we have any kind of a construction project, part of the effort that's being done by the project person who's on the staff is to have, and he calls it a communication plan, and I would say that too, but to have at least on a checklist, I'm going to have to do A, B, C, D, and part of C is get the word out early. It has to be in some way. Most of, if you're in a smaller business and even a small town, a lot of that's in somebody's head. It wouldn't be a bad idea to put a checklist down on how we're going to pursue, and in a very general way. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, and the experienced project manager can put that down on a simple piece of paper with the major efforts that have to get done. And then as each project comes along, you work with those. I've always wanted to do something like what you call a stoplight chart. It doesn't have to be a stoplight. A simple chart that shows where we are on projects and an update to the board periodically that says, here we are. Oh, by the way, the next one would say, we're into these kinds of projects over the next 6 months. And I know that it's not chartmanship. It's not and the last time Tom Temple came and spoke to us, he did exactly that, but in a lot of words. We had 3 pages. He sat and he explained what was going to happen at West Chatham, where it was going to go. He could have had a chart that showed those things on there and talked to him with the backup there. And that way, visuals are always more impressive at remembering things than lots of words on a page. You want to go back to the words on the page. But I think, to make it relatively simple, if you know that you have to, if you're going to do any kind of a project, whatever it is, that in there, you have to communicate early. And with what we have now and what you've already put together, Jill, I mean, as far as emails and so forth, if part of the communication plan is to get something out, pick a one. What's the first thing that somebody should do? Is it an announcement at the Board of Selectmen meeting that something is going to happen? Then do you send out something that's broad-based to the whole town that says we're going to be doing this? And then you individualize a set of emails or that are based on either GIS information and so forth, and then you individualize it as you go along. I don't have the perfect answer right now, but I mean, it's not an illogical way to look at communication, because communication kills. It gets more people in trouble than anything else. even when you're doing it well, because you're never going to be able to satisfy everyone. But the point is, if you get it out there and you have something that's already been discussed and at least put out ahead of time, you can't be criticized for not trying. So that's kind of my thoughts in general. But if a project, and I'm going to restate it again, you get a project, part of the project is communication. And it starts internally, I guess, with all of us somehow, and then you spread it out from there with different kinds of modes to have it happen, and then have the contractor do it also.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I think Jill wanted to respond to Peter, and then we'll have Corey speak. Jill?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. So in none of our contracts we have with MassDOT or even on road improvement projects, there's not a component for requiring the contractor to communicate or adhere to a communications plan. And I think it's definitely something that we can try to do. But I just want the board to know, and I want to be frank about it, your project manager that you're referring to is Tom Temple. Tom Temple's managing DPW. We don't have administrative staff or the capacity to do what you want us to do, and we're trying to do what we can, and certainly we'll put together a plan and a protocol, but we don't have a town communications person. And so it's definitely not an afterthought. It's just putting the time and effort to carve out from what we're doing now to put the communications out. I mean, you haven't had complaints about the sewer project. The sewer project probably has the least amount of communication. There's an email that goes out on Friday to a group, and hopefully that the media picks up on it and puts it in each paper, and we're really appreciative of it. But these are the constraints. And again, this is something you heard last year at the budget summit. And I know that the public's going to criticize me for saying this, all this town staff, and you can't find one person to do it. Well, there's 3 people who can do it. It's Tom Temple, me, or Shauna. And we're meeting weekly, and there's follow-up to that. So I think that we're going to do what we can, and we understand what the board priorities are. And with a protocol or a plan, I think that lays it out. It's still challenging to carve out that regular communication. And again, I know that there's folks out there that are going to say, how can you just not put out an email? Because it takes us a while to create that email that's going to answer all of the questions, that's not going to be perceived as too informative or not enough, or there's some angle. I mean, there's a lot of thought to be put into our communication. And you saw that with our COVID communication, crisis communication that we did. So again, I just have to, we're still a small town, but we'll do what we can. The letter that went out for the Main Street project was a request from Selectman Metter. So we did what we could to send a letter out. That's, I mean, he's shaking his head, but that's my understanding. But it's not critical at all. It's that it's something that we normally had not done before. And so to try to put the letter together to get the addresses and so forth, and the mail too, the delay. But again, it came out late. People got it. I totally understand why people are concerned. There was no set date. We're under COVID. I know business is tough. So I just want to lay that out there. Again, I'm not making any excuses. We're going to do what we can do. And I think we're working on a way to get the word out that as long as people have emails or I know that a board member or 2 wanted us to reach out for the Main Street project and knock on doors. We can, to a certain extent. I have 3 people in my highway division. If I direct them to knock on doors, then I'm taking away from someplace else. But the contractor, Lawrence Litch, has agreed to do that for us. So he has a person who's designated to the project. So again, I just want to put that out there. I know everybody's frustrated. I am too. We really want to, commit to communication and get it out there. And moving forward, we're going to do and do the best we can. And I hear you. I just need to figure out how to get a protocol together and get it into action immediately and not pulling Tom off of a project. So those are my 2 cents.
Thanks. Thank you, Jill. Corey, Peter, then Jean.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna take a deep breath because first I need to respond to that previous comment about the letter being from my request. By no way, shape, or form was that my request. The communication on the downtown project, I'll be very clear, and this is where I got to tread lightly because I'm wearing my merchant hat now, along with my selectman's hat, is the Seaview Street project came up in an update from our DPW director, Tom Temple. Following that conversation, I sent an email to Mr. Temple with my email and some other emails of some general merchants in my area saying, hey, we would like to have some communication as this project progresses. This is our contact information. The letter I did not initiate, and I was surprised that it came out just before the weekend. So I want the record clear on that one. That letter to property owners did not come at my request. So I do want to be clear with that.
Actually, it was a good idea, so I just want to put that out, but I understand how it got.
I don't. Well, if it's good and people are positive, it's not. I won't take the credit for it because I was a little mixed about it. I guess what I originally raised my hand about is we're talking a lot about communication and outreach going into a project, and as the town manager, has previously mentioned that the staff only has X amount of hours in a day. There's only so many resources we have to work with. We have a lot of projects, and that's just the reality of it. So when it comes to issues, complaints, criticism of this, something not happening, criticism that we have an empty promise, we didn't follow through with it, does the board suggest is the best mechanism? Is it going to go straight to our project manager, which in many of these cases has been noted is Tom? Is it going to go to the board? Will it go to the town manager? How can we efficiently address? I mean, we all get emails, we all get phone calls, we all get stopped. Collectively, how do you want to handle this as efficiently as we can? Because I think we all want to get through this. We all want to work together. I don't think that's in question. But how do we put our resources and our energy into addressing those kind of issues? That's my question, because I get one comment, Jeff may get another email, Shireen will get another phone call, and then we're all chasing around. Like, how can we collectively take all that information and in a timely, efficient way address it and hopefully correct it? So that is my question.
Jill, do you want to speak to that? Because we had that conversation too.
Yeah, I think the best course of action is that you send an email to me, because otherwise I'm not going to know, of course, what's going on. And I try to keep all of the board members, I guess, equally informed, and you're probably getting the same thing. So if you want to send it, if you yourselves want to send it directly to me, or if you want to have the resident or business send it to me, then at least, I can be held accountable. I can look into it, hopefully address it so that it's not another week until your next selectmen's meeting. Okay. So, I'm certainly willing to do that. And then I can, sometimes maybe it's not DPW, maybe it's Dan Tobin for something else. So at least I can get it out to where it needs to go, and then follow up with you on the status of it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I think it was Peter then, Dean. Peter. You're muted, Peter.
Of course I am. To Jill's comment, I understand what she's saying, and I don't want to give the impression that we have to build some kind of a big, huge, 15-page plan. I think that the acknowledgement up front of communication being important is something that should be, a bullet on somebody's checklist. Either it's in their head or it's on a piece of paper that says, I need to make sure that something gets out. And how detailed, I'd say take small steps first, and then we can build on it. You want to be able to say a project is going to be started. When you don't know, you just say you don't know. It may start in the next 2 weeks because of A, B, C, and D. And I understand that we really need that person that we were going to put in the budget last time around. That person would cover the entire staff. And that would be well worth it, because the amount of time that we spend answering questions because something wasn't perceived or wasn't set up front is just as detrimental as you know, how much time it takes to get something out to begin with. Because what are we doing right now? We're spending a whole amount of time responding to communications issue. And in general, if you look across the board, yeah, I understand that there are problems, and individuals are having great problems, but we have a means to be able to, I think, at least get some of the information out. Baby steps first. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm going to try to keep this short, looking at the lateness of the hour, and we do have an executive session coming up. And Peter just alluded to the communications position that the town manager had initially recommended for the 2021 budget. And we had to put that aside because of financial considerations and especially COVID. So I think, in fairness to the town manager, she was trying to be forward thinking on that. But I really think it's important for this board to emphasize to the finance committee especially, and we're meeting in a budget session next week, the importance of these staffing positions. I told Jill when we met a year ago that if she felt we needed new staff, additional staff, I would support it. And this is a community of nations. You just said if we had this staff person in place, we might not be here talking about all of this stuff tonight. And yet, when we go to the finance committee with the budget, and they, you know, quite understandably look at the bottom line and want to ask questions about why you're proposing to add staff. It's, you know, too many. These are too many positions to be considering. When the final budget was proposed was reviewed by the finance committee, I think Selectman Dykens happened to attend that meeting as well as I did, because I'm a liaison. I got up and urged the finance committee to approve that budget. I don't remember whether Jeff did or not, but I did. And I have some credibility with them because I served on the finance committee, and I think they look to me. But I think it would be helpful at the budget summit, and starting with the budget summit, but not concluding with the budget summit, that individual selectmen make very clear to the finance committee and to town meeting, you know, what you're giving up if you don't approve additional staffing that's necessary to carry out the business of the town. So that's just really an admonition, I think, that we need to be very aggressively proactive going forward if we're going to resolve some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Do we have any further discussion or comments? Jeff?
Yeah, no, I was there. I'll reaffirm that Dean did get up and remind the finance committee of the need for these positions, that position in particular, and other positions. And I think we do need to be supportive of the town manager's recommendations. She had, I think Dean used the phrase forward-looking. She was forward-looking and recommending this position. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that, which Jill has this evening and Dean has reaffirmed it. So I think we need to revisit that particular position going forward. I think that's a good reminder, Dean, and I thank you. Very appropriate.
And I also want to add that was also in result to us having our board goals and objectives, where we brought this up as right. Something a couple of years ago. And I'm not trying to say that, you know, anything. We certainly do have our challenges as a town right now, but you know, it's been on our thoughts and discussion. Jill, you wanted to add something, and then we'll wrap this up. You're muted now. Jill, you're muted.
Thank you for the support of the additional positions for my first growth budget in 20 years. But nonetheless, we're here tonight because there was an issue. There was a failure to communicate. And I appreciate the board's input, and definitely everything you said. We will work to make it happen, and we'll put a protocol together. And you know, this, I'm only hoping it can only get better for this street sidewalk project, and I know it will. So I know that we, you know, we're all very passionate about this, but we're all on the same page. So I did want to let the board know that we're going to work and try to get this done as best as we can. And if there's another hiccup, we're going to figure out how to work around it. But our goal is to communicate, and definitely it's a priority of mine. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Great, thank you very much. Any other comments from the board before we move to the next agenda item? Okay, so our next agenda item is committee appointments, and we have 2 tonight that we need to address. The first one is for Aunt Lydia's Cove, and the second one's for the Cable Advisory Committee. The first one, Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee, is 1 vacancy for term ending June 30th, 2023. Peter Taylor interviewed for this committee on October 6th, 2020. And so I guess I'm looking for motions to appoint. Corey, your hand's up.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to move to appoint Peter Taylor to the Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee until June 30, 2023, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, second. All right. Dean seconded and Corey made the motion. All right, so we'll start. Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Jeff?
Nay.
Peter? I think I need to have you unmuted, Peter.
Nay.
And the chair says nay. Okay, thank you. Our next committee appointment is for Cable Advisory Committee. It's 1 vacancy for a term ending June 30th, 2023. William Cook interviewed for the Cable Advisory Committee on October 13th, 2020. Do we have a motion to appoint?
Madam Chair.
I
Go ahead,
move
Pete.
to
Go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead, Pete.
Hearing myself. I move to appoint William Cook to the Cable Advisory Committee until June 30th, 2023, unless sooner revoked or a successor is appointed.
And I'm assuming Jeff's going to second that.
Second.
Okay. All right. We'll take a vote on this. And it's for William Cook to the Cable Advisory Committee. Peter? Peter?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Okay. Thank you. That concludes that order of business. Our last order of business before we go before public comments and then the executive session is I just wanted to bring up that our meeting in 2 weeks is also Election Day on November 3rd. And I want to know the feeling of the board on holding the meeting on Tuesday, November 3rd, or rescheduling it. And some matter of background is that Mass Secretary of State advises that only public meetings that must not be held on Election Day are all public hearings held under zoning acts by City Council, planning boards, and boards of appeal, and public hearings by the State Department of Community Affairs on low-rent public housing. And those are all part of statutory law. All other public hearings and meetings appear to be permitted on Election Day, although Secretary of State does not recommend holding them on the day of the election. So that's our background. I just wanted to get thoughts on whether this board would like to have a meeting on Tuesday, November 3rd. Any thoughts? Corey, Jeff, and then Dean.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I just ask if there's anything pressing that we would have to, that date would require us to meet, anything time sensitive or really pressing. If not, I don't have an opposition to not having a meeting that night. I'm sure the public is going to be very engaged in what happens for this election. So, I don't think we're going to get the top rating that night. So. If we were to proceed, so unless there's something time sensitive or very pressing, I can defer us meeting.
Jill, nothing's on the radar per se, correct?
No, I have nothing programmed, but if there is something that comes up, our posting requirement is Friday. So by Friday afternoon, we would know. I'll just figure it out with however you decide, if we cancel it now or leave it on the books and cancel it on Friday, but however you prefer. But at this point, there's nothing scheduled for that night.
Okay. I think it was Dean next.
Well, I think Peter
Yes.
was ahead of, I think Peter.
Peter. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. I had the same comment. It depends on whether we have anything pressing. If we had if we were going to do anything, we'd want to make it very short. Since there's nothing on the schedule, I'd lean to canceling it now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dean.
Yeah, I think we should honor the recommendation of the Secretary of the Commonwealth. Obviously interested in encouraging people to vote and not watching town board meetings. And I'd rather make the decision tonight. If some emergency comes up, we could always have a meeting any other day that week or morning or whatever, if there was something critical. So I would, my recommendation would be no meeting on election night.
Okay. And Jeff, you had your hand up and now it's down. So
Yeah, no, I agree with everybody, and I don't think we should meet. I recommend cancellation.
okay. All right. Well, we've got the consensus of the board that we will forego a November 3rd meeting of the Board of Selectmen unless there is some sort of emergency that we need to address. And then we will know that by the Friday prior. Okay, thanks on that. All right, our last order of business tonight before we go into executive session is the public comment period. Again, this is on any of the agenda items that we discussed in the new business agenda board discussion items only section. So I'm just going to ask if anybody would like to speak, that they raise their hand in the remote participation group or speak out. Okay, I see that Elaine Gibbs has her hand up. I'm just checking to see if there's somebody else. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Okay, go ahead, Elaine.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on the project communication protocol.
Sure.
I live on Cross Street and have 3 addresses on Cross Street, and I did not receive any notification in writing about the fact that the whole road was going to be bulldozed yesterday. I only knew about it because I had been communicating with Tom Temple. I don't think the solution is difficult in terms of failure to communicate, and I don't think additional staff is required. Everything that's been on this agenda item has been communicating to the public about decisions that have already been made after the fact. That's the problem. The granite for Main Street was ordered months ago. Tom Temple and the town manager knew that the Main Street project was in the works. They didn't know the specific time, but on September 25th, after Selectman Nicastro and I both asked for an update on West Chatham and Cross Street, because those were the only 2 we knew about, that is when we should have been told, so that the businesses could have been advised and the residents. The fact that a letter was dated October 5th, but whoever sent it out didn't receive it. Nobody received it until the weekend. Doesn't make any sense to me. And then a blast went out to businesses, but I think the people that are continually dropped to the bottom of the list are residents. There are neighborhoods here. There are people who live here. There are people who live on Main Street that didn't get notified. And unless they heard the tonight or on October 13th, the announcements, they still don't know what's going to happen on October 26th on Main Street. That's just wrong. And I absolutely understand why Main Street has to be done. But town planners, and I wrote the selectmen on this, to shut down Cross Street and then decide to virtually shut down Main Street with the sidewalk project makes no sense. Those 2 roads are egresses for the other road. They're detours. And both of those roads now are under massive construction as of next Monday. And we are in the middle of a pandemic. We are going into the holidays. And we also have the West Chatham. I think it's totally tone deaf for that to have been considered. And I guess it's too late to cancel Main Street, but to actually schedule Main Street at the same time that Cross Street is dug up for 10 weeks defies explanation. And this isn't the first time that this has happened, where residents are really the last people to know. I would ask that the town manager and the town staff actually think about the full-time residents and how we're expected to function, and put themselves in our position. Again, we're going to have family coming in who are going to have been quarantined and COVID testing and stuff for the holidays, and Main Street's going to be dug up and Cross Street's going to be dug up, and there's no way out. And it's going to hurt the businesses because they're going to turn around. The only way to get to the eastern stores past Library Lane are going to be if they go Bridge Street and Shore Road, or go out Old Harbor and all the way around to Chatham Bars. It's unfair to the businesses and it's unfair to the residents. And it's not a staffing issue. It's thinking ahead about what you would like to know as a person, as a resident. And it should have been on the agenda. We should have been given a heads up 2 or 3 weeks ago so that we could have been giving input during the agenda items instead of finding out after the fact. It's just common courtesy. And again, it doesn't need staff. It just needs thinking ahead and saying, you know, businesses need to plan, families need to plan, put yourselves in our position and just do it. And Corey's got a business there. Dean lives there. They know how bad it is right now up there. It's not going to get any better. And this is going to go right through Christmas. And my feeling was if you did Cross Street and got it done, you could probably finish Main Street. If those two projects, because it's the same contractors, slow down, they're not going to get the asphalt down, and we're going to be looking at spring if we have any bad weather. And I think you finish one project before you start another. So that's all I have to say, but I think it's a very simple fix. Just tell people ahead of time. Don't let us find out after the fact. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other public comments tonight? Just checking. Okay, I don't see any. So we're going to move into, this ends our regular part of our meeting, and I'm going to accept a motion to adjourn to executive session. If somebody wants to make a motion according to how it's written in the packet. Go ahead, Dean.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the board go into executive session under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, the CMEA, and that stands for the Chatham Municipal Employees Association. I spell that out because I remember we had a criticism some time ago what the FAA was. And the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body with no return to open session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll take a roll call to adjourn to executive session. Peter.
Aye.
Corey.
Aye.
Dean.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
And the chair says aye. I want to just thank everybody for participating this evening, staff that were on the call, and to the public, the remote participants, and to the board. And we are going to adjourn to executive session without a return to open session. Good night, everyone. And we'll adjourn in about 3 minutes with the Board of Selectmen in executive session. Thank you.